So I'll give it another try. I think the microphone works. Perfect. Yeah, we're going to start. Dear friends, colleagues, partners, participants, Erev Tov, guten Abend. Welcome to our first German Israeli Young Scientists evening. I'm on purpose saying first because we all agree, or the organizers at least, that many more should follow. And we're here tonight to celebrate an evening of science, of curiosity and collaboration between Israel and Germany. The evening itself grew out of a rather simple but powerful idea, namely bringing together outstanding young researchers from our both countries. And not only bringing them together, but giving or creating a space where conversations can start, where new ideas can emerge, connections can be made, and hopefully even collaborations can begin. On behalf of GIF, the German Israeli Foundation of Scientific Research and Development, I would like to thank all our partners that made this evening possible. And naturally, my first and heartfelt thank you goes to ScienceAbroad. It's your partnership that made it possible. It's your partnership that made it possible that this evening is actually happening. And when mentioning ScienceAbroad, I have to mention Elad Arad. Elad, it's your motivation, your dedication and persistence that brought us here tonight. And yeah, we all can't thank you enough. Toda rabba lecha. A very special thanks is also going out to our partners here, the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service. I see Claudia in the back. The Embassy of Israel in Germany with Michael and Nora. And of course, the German Federal Ministry of Research, and now I have to look again because it's a new name, Research, Technology and Space, BMFTR. And the Helmholtz Foundation, who's also here today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for believing in this event and in the community it represents. I'm going to keep it briefly and short because you'll hear plenty of me later, but let me express how much I'm looking forward to hearing from you, from the panelists, from the lecturers, and from all of you who came here today to share your ideas, bring your posters, and get into discussion with us. I'm very much looking forward to this, and I hope you all leave this evening not only inspired but connected to new partnerships and hopefully new possibilities. Thanks for being here. Let's enjoy a wonderful evening. And now I look at the program that you all have on the back of your name tag. It's Elad's turn.
So just a technical comment, you have the program in here, and you also have a QR for the abstract booklet, and it's supposed to work. No one knows if it will actually work, but I really hope so. And I'm not used to this situation, so I'll read. Dear friends, it's great to have you all with us. We were preparing for this for a very long time, and we hope to make it maybe an annual event for young scientists, because we don't have these meetings very often. I wanted to share with you a bit how this idea started and this initiative in all started. So as a postdoc and a member of the community of ScienceAbroad, we often claim that we don't have enough of these scientific gatherings that are related to the community. And we realize that we have a blind spot, that young researchers are not often part of the gang. Usually, it's mainly for undergrads or for senior professors, and there are all sorts of these societies, and we're not part of the gang as young scientists. And while I was complaining about it to Nadav from ScienceAbroad one day, I was expecting him to roll his eyes and maybe think that he needs to show his support and finish with this. He actually told me, okay, let's do it. And we started with falling walls, and we started talking about it, and we thought that it would be just one person. Maybe we'll have to find one person to go and participate in this event. And then at some point we started to talk to Verena from GIF and to Shira from ScienceAbroad as well. And somehow this event started to collect into a larger issue. And then we started with 5 people, maybe 10, and maybe 20, and it grew up, and then we decided to have this kind of event, and it grew up again and again. And as you can see, I'm not reading, so I'm not so accurate. But later on, the embassy joined, and they joined as well. And this event started to become bigger and bigger, and it's fascinating for us to have you all in here, because I was not sure that it's actually going to happen when we started to talk about it. And, you know, we sometimes just daydream and hope for the best. There's a lot of work to do, and it was hard to organize even this evening, and the delegation of scientists that arrived into this Berlin Science Week. And probably I did most of the mistakes, so sorry for a few of the emails. Next time we'll evolve into a better version of it, and I really hope that it will become an annual event. The challenge of creating new bonds in people like in chemistry might be somewhat energetically costly. At the beginning, you need to cross many barriers. In some cases, there are catalysts which we can use, and I think that these events are the catalyst for these kind of new bonds. And I think that I really hope that it will work today and we can create more events like this in the future. I need to thank a million people along the way. Many of you heard about this event in some way or another, and I asked so many questions along the way. And I won't mention everyone. I'll just say that the people who made it from ScienceAbroad and GIF and DAAD and the embassy are the important ones who helped a lot. And I think that in this case, the words of Yehuda Amichai, one of my favorite poets, are relevant, saying, "No beekeeper would put his hives in here, but people make honey from the barren land, and it's sweeter than all." So thanks a million for the help. Your honey is the sweetest of them all. I hope you enjoy today, and that we'll have a fruitful evening. Thanks.
I have so many pages here, don't worry, to be short, I can promise you. Good evening, everyone. Great to see you here. My name is Nadav Duani. I'm the CEO of ScienceAbroad. I'm truly honored to stand here this evening on a night when we celebrate the long and profound friendship between the State of Israel and Germany. A friendship built over decades of cooperation, of multiple support, of trust, and yet one that carries a painful, terrible history. A history we cannot and must not ignore, even on a festive evening like this. 92 years have passed since the night when more than 25,000 books were burned, the work of Jewish writers like Freud, Einstein, Kafka, and more. Brilliant minds whose words went up in flames simply because they were Jews. 87 years have passed since the night when the windows of synagogue across Germany were shuttered. The Kristerlacht, and still the memory remains alive, burning, painful. So many years have gone, and yet the blood of our brothers and sisters still cries out from the ground. We, the younger generation, those of us born in the 80s, did not experience the Holocaust ourselves, but we grow up next to neighbors with numbers tattoos on their arms. The Brody family, the Vardy family, the Cohen family, and with grandparents who survived the inferno. I myself am the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. My grandmother survived the labor camps of Jado in Libya. And if we weren't for the victory of the free nation at that time, I, and perhaps all of us, wouldn't be standing here today. And now, almost a century later, we find ourselves once again in a time when the hatred is on the rise. a time when anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli sentiment are not only spreading, but have become almost normalized, even in circles that call themselves liberals. Jews, men and women, are forced to hide their identity on leading universities, campuses around the world. They hid their Star of David, avoided speaking Hebrew. But tonight is the opposite of that. This evening stands for strength, for the power to turn pain into partnership, to turn a history of darkness into future of light. This gathering between Israelis and Germans, between young researchers and senior scientists, is not something we can take for granted. It is a source of pride, of hope, of inspiration. It reminds us how far we can go when we choose not only to remember, but also to create. Our future lies in collaboration, in Israeli and German scientists who research together, ask bold questions together, and try together to make the world a better place. My hope is to see more and more German scientists coming to Israel and more Israeli scientists coming here to Germany and back to Israel. A partnership of science, of idea, of humanity, a shared future that despite unthinkable past, we choose to build a future of compassion, of curiosity, of friendship, a better future for all of us. Before I conclude, I want to express my gratitude to our partners, to our friends at the GIF, and especially for you, Verena, to the DAAD, to Michael Bar-Or from the Israeli Embassy in Berlin, to Dr. Shira Bar-Or, who leads our Science Abroad community here in Germany, to Dana Berenzon, our Director of Communities and Digital Communications, and especially thanks to Dr. Elad Arad, whose vision, dedication, and determination brought us all here tonight. Elad, come for a second. Thank you for your work, your faith, your vision, and for the hope you represent.
Now we need to
He's higher than me. It's not so hard. Thank you. Have a great evening. And to be honest with you, we are in Science Abroad, allowed our community to create things and change the world. But without those amazing people like Elad, that taking those ideas and create a reality will not be able to do nothing. We are based on people that volunteer in our community and create a change. Elad, again, thank you for all the things you're doing, and this is only the beginning. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Michael Bar-Or from the Israeli Embassy here in Berlin. I would also open with thanking the great partners that have made this event happen, the GIF, the DAAD, the BMFTR, and of course Helmholtz and Minerva, who I think are present here as well, Professor Lindberger. Coming together this evening is pretty much a conclusion of 2 not so simple years, as we all know very, very well. Not so simple for Israelis, not so simple for Israelis in Germany, and not so simple for Israelis worldwide, and not so simple for the world either. However, I think today we are at the point in which we are starting to have more hope once again. Even tonight, at these very moments, I'd like to think that another body of hostages is being returned to his family, to rest in peace, where his family members can visit him and not to be held in captivity in Gaza. And I believe that we all pray and hope that to see the very last one of the hostages being returned to their families. This is something that have been a shadow over everything that we've been doing for the last 2 years. It still is a shadow, but the shadow is maybe subsiding gradually. During these 2 years, as I think everybody in this room knows, Israeli science and academic collaboration has suffered significantly, in some places more, in some places less, and I'm very, very happy to say that the German-Israeli partnership in science and academia has proven to be a very, very strong one. Of Of course, it hasn't been without its own difficulties, but I think that it's very, very clear that Israeli science and academia, the Israeli scientists and researchers have found Germany to be a much more hospitable environment in the last couple of years than in practically any other country in the world. Not to mention specific institutions. There have been wonderful institutions in many, many different countries, but as a whole, as an environment, I think that Germany has proven to be a very true friend to Israeli science and to Israeli researchers. I very much hope, and I personally very strongly believe, that this will prove to be very beneficial for both partners. Israelis will reach out to Germans to build strong collaboration, and as we will see later on this evening, we believe that Israeli-German partnership in science and research can create wonderful things, and I think we'll see a lot of that in the coming years. And that is, I think, in the nature of, and perhaps more than anyone else, of young researchers, young scientists, right? Because scientists in general, and young scientists especially, don't care about the present. The present is already known. We know what we know, and so it's not interesting anymore. We know what we're curious about is what we don't know yet. We're curious about the future. We want to know what can be, what we don't have yet and can happen. And this is what we're actually here to discuss tonight. What are the, maybe in the spirit of the journal Berlin Science Week and the Fall Summit, what do we not know yet and can be, and that can pave a way for a better, brighter future? So I myself am very, very happy to be here this evening. I'd like to think that this event is a milestone in a turning point in the general atmosphere that we're operating in, that we'll see more and more collaboration expanding here in Germany and worldwide, that we'll see new frontiers being broken, we'll see more partnerships being forged. And I have no doubt that the people sitting here in this room, and Israelis and Germans, and Israeli scientists and German scientists, Israeli researchers and German researchers will be a major component of forging the future of science worldwide, Israeli and German science, of course, but of forging a better future for all of us. So thank you very much, and look forward to the rest of the evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabriele Hermani from the German Ministry of Science, Technology and Space. New name, yeah, well, same task. Dear Verena, dear Michael, dear Elad, dear Dr. Hülshörster, dear young scientists, dear panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. German Israeli scientific cooperation is unique, and it plays a central role in our relations as a whole. It was science that laid in the late 1950s the foundation for the establishment of diplomatic relations. It also, thanks to these scientific initiatives, that we can celebrate 60 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries this year. At that time, in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, the cooperation between the Max Planck Society and the Weizmann Institute of Science was more than just a research partnership. It was a sign of a new beginning. Since these beginnings, numerous scientists from Germany and Israel have contributed to a broad spectrum of excellent research collaborations, from basic research to applied research, from the natural sciences to the humanities and social sciences. Dear young scientists, we need you to ensure that this cooperation remains successful and lively in the future. I am therefore very pleased and grateful that we are coming together tonight for this German-Israeli Young Scientists Evening. Thank you, dear organizers, for making this evening possible. For the BMFTR, this is the new, letters for our ministry, the networking and exchange of young talents from Germany and Israel is of outstanding importance for our research cooperation as a whole. With the Martin Buber Society of Fellows, we support young scientists in particular young scientists in the humanities and social sciences, and the German Israeli Fundation, GIF, offers, among others, a platform for early career scientists with the GIF Young Scientists meetings, and the Minerva Stiftung Foundation also focuses on graduates and postdocs with its fellowship program. These and other programs, such as those of the DAAD, pave the way for future German-Israeli collaboration for a generation of researchers who can build on each other both personally and professionally. After the Hamas attack on the 7th October of 2023, the situation for our cooperation was difficult and challenging. This was especially true for you, the fellows in the different exchange programs. As the BMFTR, together with those responsible for the programs, we did our best to keep the programs, to keep the exchange alive. Among other things, we have provided 2 million euros in emergency support, in particular for the Minerva Stiftung and the Martin Buber Society of Fellows. I would like to sincerely thank all of those who have worked so hard to ensure that the exchange and the networking of young scientists has been successful over the past 2 years, especially under these difficult conditions. The BMFTR has taken a clear position against calls for a boycott of Israeli scientific organizations, universities, and scientists. Science in Israel is a voice of reason that should be strengthened. It is also a pillar of an open and democratic Israel. I'm convinced that scientific cooperation, despite all the conflicts, can contribute to a more peaceful future. In the long term, I hope this will be also apply to regional cooperation in the Middle East. Dear young scientists, I wish you all success for your German-Israeli cooperation and tonight an inspiring exchange for all of us. I'm also looking forward for the upcoming Falling Walls Summit, which will start the day after tomorrow. Thank you very much.
We're going to start now with our panel discussion, and I would like to ask, first of all, Michael Barrault. He's the moderator of this panel tonight, and our participants are Ulman Lindenberger, Professor Lindenberger from the Max Planck Institute. You can still choose from all the seats, and Professor Eva Unger, who is already here as well, from the Humboldt University, and we have Kerstin Pahl, Professor Pahl, thank you very much. Andrea Fram is also with us tonight from the Helmholtz Association. And we have Aviv Ze'evi from the Israel Innovation Authority, who is not with us tonight. So we'll move over to Lior Shaltiel, Dr. Shaltiel, from, and I hope I'm pronouncing properly, Neuroaxon Biologic and the Huji. Thank you.
Good evening once again. The panel this evening will try to do trying to be in Israeli spirit, very effective to the people present. We'll try to touch upon two topics that are very relevant for young researchers. Established researchers, basically, they know what they're doing. They don't really need panels to give them guidance on how to build the relationship and what are the challenges. They usually already know who they know and they know what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. But young researchers, in many cases, are lacking this information that is usually gained only through experience. So this panel will try not to help you maybe not to get through your own experience, but maybe to use other people's experience to give some key points. Namely, trying to answer two questions that are complementing. One is, what are the challenges and what are the advantages in collaboration for researchers on a personal level between Germans and Israelis, right? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the things that you'd like to see different in your counterparts? And the other one is, I'd say, what are the platforms that exist for such collaboration on a more institutional level? And I think that the panel that we have here that was introduced by Verena Schifferman from the director of the GIF is more than equipped to provide some introspection into these questions. So if you don't mind, I think we'll start with a few questions to different participants of the panel. I would say that the way we do it is that I direct a question to each and every one of you, but in your turn, please feel free to reflect not only on the question, but on to basically whatever it is that you feel that you'd like to share. Keeping in mind that there are some time constraints. So we're supposed to, at some point, move on to the food. So perhaps I'll start with you, Professor Pan, right?
Yes.
So you've, I believe that you've worked in different positions with many Israeli researchers and facilitated a collaboration of Israeli or had to work with Israeli researchers, young researchers. So perhaps, if you don't mind, I would like to ask you, from your perspective, what are the strengths that Israelis bring to the table? What are the weaknesses, or maybe I should rephrase, what are the things that you'd rather that they not bring to the table, if possible? And perhaps, if you may add also, what are the things that you think that the German side is the strongest when it comes to these collaborations?
Thank you, first of all, for the invitation. It is true. From my personal experience, I collaborated on the individual level and also on the institutional level. And in terms of the strength, of course, is that Israel is one of the leading nations in not only science but also humanities. I'm a humanities scholar, so I'm an historian. And what I found particularly fruitful is that many Israeli scholars who come to Germany have already a very international trajectory. So it's not just that they're bringing let's say, specific Israeli academic experience, but they're bringing a specific international or global scientific experience. So, for instance, the Minerva scholar I hosted was such I think she lived on like 4 continents or something. And so she had actually insight into academic institutions that I didn't have. In terms of, and this would also count for so I'm not really speaking on behalf of Leopoldina, but I can say that Leopoldina has a long-term commitment to collaboration with Israeli scientists precisely for this reason, precisely because Israel is the leading nation whose research just cannot be ignored. In terms of what they shouldn't bring to the table, I would maybe phrase this a bit differently. So coming from the humanities, and maybe this was already introduced in the keynotes, is that it means, so collaborating with Israeli scientists means simultaneously acknowledging elephants in the room and moving them out of the way. And one difficulty that I encountered was actually that because of, for historical political reasons, the relationship between Germany and Israel is sometimes so overdetermined that people approach it with hesitation, not necessarily hostile or hostility, but more that they don't really know what to actually say. And the challenge is actually establishing like the normalcy of scientific collaboration and saying, see, this is just normal collaboration. This has nothing to do with or not directly. So, and this is what I mean by acknowledging the elephant in the room and moving it out of the way. Maybe this for starters. I also have some suggestions for how to approach that, but maybe I save this for later.
Thank you very, very much. So yes, I think it would be very, very interesting to revisit it, maybe after the first round of questions. Dr. And I forgot to say, I apologize very much. I would be very happy if you could introduce a little bit yourself in a few words and what you're doing, because that I didn't do properly.
Shall I add that?
Of course.
Okay. So I'm an historian. I'm actually at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development. I'm currently finishing my second book. I work in the 18th and the 19th century, and generally in the field of the history of emotions, which includes like the history of human rights, history of humanitarianism, and similar topics.
Thank you very, very much. Dr. Shaltiel, if I may ask you, so you come both from the background of research and of entrepreneurship, which I think is a very, very important
and a scholar of DAAD, and living 8 years in Germany. between 2006 and 2014, between two wars. So when you're leaving Israel, something happened. So it's between the Lebanon war and after that it's Tzuk Eitan. But it was amazing experience to live in Germany. To graduate from the LMU in Munich. I'm more in the scientific. My PhD is in pharmacology. I agree with the point that raised before. There is an elephant in the room, but I'm taking it not as a scientific collaboration and more from humanity, man to man. One of the things that I experience is that people were not open enough to speak with me because they're afraid that if they will have some kind of criticism, it will be maybe take it as an anti-Semitic criticism and not just objective point of view. I had in the LMU, I had different colleagues. One of them next to me was actually Palestinians, and we actually joke on the situation and we create a Berlin war between us. So it's just try to get the fun of it, you know. And we are one of the best friends now. We have very good relationship with all of my colleagues. So beyond the scientific collaboration, I think when you create really a bond between the people, some of them we even took a trip to the US together. That's create the chemistry. And yes, we have very good joint background as Israeli and German, but we have also the responsibility to create something good from that. And we have the tools.
Thank you very, very much. Professor Unger, if I may ask you, from your perspective, following the things that were said, but you have a unique perspective as a board member of the GIF, which oversees many aspects of joint German-Israeli research collaboration. If I may ask you, can you maybe try and describe how would you envision an ideal scientific collaboration? How would you, maybe I'll leave it at that.
All right, so my name is Eva Unger. I'm a scientist or natural scientist. I'm a chemist. I'm an academic research group leader at the Helmholtz Center in Berlin, working in photovoltaics. From my background, I mean, working in photovoltaics, I've always had a lot of collaborative and friendly relationships with many Israeli scientists because there's a lot of photovoltaics research, especially also in the Negev Desert and other research institutions. We started a Helmholtz international graduate school that we ran for a couple of years, and we're still continuing. And in this framework, there was actually active student exchange with other PIs, with students. We had a very vivid exchange for many years. I really felt sometimes very impatient with the bureaucracy. And then when we started this Helmholtz International Research School, I was so grateful for the drive and the impatience, and sometimes also the attitude of let's just get things done instead of finding all the obstacles. So I really gelled with this, and I really enjoyed that there was always this drive and enthusiasm and a let's get things done attitude that has really been injecting a lot of fruitful discussions and positive developments in every scientific exchange. I also really appreciate, maybe it's also the particular scientists I interact with, but the no bullshit policy, the really, you know, adherence to facts and knowledge, and not getting lost in random side and unimportant discussions. So I felt usually with Israelis in the room, there's a positive atmosphere of getting things done, and I really love that. And this is why I also keep going back to trying to help to foster these actively, these collaborations.
Thank you very, very much. Mrs. Fram, And then, as a director of Israel Relations in the Helmholtz Association, what I perhaps would ask you maybe to elaborate a little more from institutional perspective, because a lot of what we've heard so far has a very strong personal aspect, which is obviously immensely important. But maybe taking it one step higher in the I'd say the overarching perspective. If you could maybe elaborate a little more on the, first of all, opportunities, the systematic opportunities, the institutional opportunities that Helmholtz offers for such collaboration, and also from your perspective, what did you find from your experience works best? What did you find needs to gain more attention to work better?
Okay, so first of all, I don't have a PhD, but I lived over 6 years in Israel. So I think I experienced, I think, was it 5 elections, and the pandemic and the war and October 7, and so I think I'm quite up there. And I can only underline what you just said regarding the spirit and the dynamic. I spent a lot of time now since October 7 here in Germany, because obviously we kind of shifted events over here. And this is what I always experience when I'm back in Germany. I kind of feel I'm missing this dynamic. I'm missing this vibe where you just get things done. And here you just, after a while, just get this feeling is like people discuss a lot of things. And there are lots of position papers being written, but nothing's really happening. So this is what I really, really love and appreciate, working in Israel and also with Israeli scientists and companies and startups. For Helmholtz, we have 18 research centers across Germany. So we pretty much have the opportunity that we do have our head office and do have an own funding instrument, but we also have, obviously, each individual research center where we kind of find different possibilities or see where we can maybe do, like, for instance, at the moment, we had the Weizmann Institute here a couple of weeks ago, and we had them meet with the Helmholtz Zentrum Berlin, but also with KIT, where we haven't had like a proper scientific collaboration yet, and also with CISPA, which is our Center for Cyber Information and Security. And we're now in the process of setting up a fellowship postdoc program. So it's like, you know, for each individual center, obviously it's different. We also have like ocean research, where we do have a very successful collaboration with the University of Haifa and Geomar. And obviously, in the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a challenge, but we're now trying to really push things forward again and get back into the game.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Professor Lindenberger, I think that your experience and all the different topics that were discussed is very, very, very wide. So I'd like to ask you perhaps the widest question, both on a personal experience of working with Israeli counterparts, supervising Israeli researchers, but also as, until just very, very recently, the head of the Minerva, which I very much hope everybody here is strongly familiar with. Also from an institutional perspective, not only from experience, but also from the, I'd say, the opportunities that exist, what are the opportunities, what works well, and what would be your recommendations for young researchers who wish to join in collaboration?
Yeah, thank you for asking me such a broad question. I feel myself in a new position, and young in that new position, namely as an older statesman. My name is Ulman Lindenberger, and I have been the Vice President of the Max Planck Society from 2020 to 2023, and I have been the Scientific Director of the Minerva Foundation up to a few weeks ago. Typically it would have changed in 2023, but given the very difficult and delicate situation, the President asked me to continue my job for another couple of years, and it has been certainly one of the most enriching experiences of my life to serve in this function. Since 2020, I have been to Israel before, but since 2020 I've been to Israel 9 times. Actually my first visit was not so easy. It was in April 21, even though I assumed office in 2020 because of the pandemic. And thanks to the wonderful Lou Bohlen, who runs the Minerva Stiftung in Munich, she told me 5 days is not enough, a week is not enough, you need 3 weeks. And So I went to Israel for 3 weeks from the University of Haifa and the Technion to the University of the Negev. And that gives me an opportunity to say something about the 3 pillars of the Minerva Foundation. There are the stipends that go back and forth. Germans going to Israel, Israelis going to Germany. There are the Minerva centers across the entire country. And there is a special relation to the Weizmann, which has a program of its own, which is about collaborative research between Max Planck and the Weizmann. I think what the Max Planck Society has to offer is that we are based on autonomy, bottom-up driven, long-term research, which makes us attractive for our partners in Israel. One of the accomplishments of this period, and that relates in a way to Helmholtz, is that we finally also managed to have our own office in Israel. And I think that's extremely important. So we have an Israeli who is now an employee of the Max Planck Society, Hila Elroy, and she sits in the Van Leer Institute in Jerusalem. And I still remember when I went to her office the first time, and there were 2 flags, the German and the Israeli flag. And I said, oh, is there a special holiday today? And she said, no, of course, there are always these 2 flags in my office. So, and I actually very much appreciated this. What could we do better? I think I always take Alexander von Humboldt Foundation as a model when it comes to having a notion of funding research that is really about the individual researcher and trying to create a family, so to say, where one kind of funding would follow the next and create a history of funding. And I think if you think of the stipends, if you think of the Minerva centers, if you think of Max Planck partner groups, even Max Planck centers, I think it would be good, and also reaching across the institutions, to increase the coordination such that a person may have a biography of working relations between Israel and Max Planck. So coordinating these various initiatives and programs a bit more. Where do I see the greatest promise for the future of German-Israeli scientific collaboration? There is so much promise that it's hard to make a choice. One thing that comes to mind is climate change. We now have a program between the MPI of Geoanthropology and the University, Ben Gurion University of the Negev, because they have dealt with extreme conditions for a long time. They know what it means to have little water and too much sun. And so I think climate change is a big issue. Another one is everything that has to do with technology, virtual reality, and so on, because Israel startups are just so innovative and have so many good ideas. And we should not forget about the humanities. I really think that they are the backbone of the cultural dialogue, and there are several Minerva centers who really fulfill an important function in fostering cultural relations between Germany and Israel. Perhaps one example of a successful collaboration that I have witnessed from first contact to long term is that we invited Barak Medina from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem to talk about the special situation of Israel as a state that actually doesn't have a constitution. It has a declaration of independence, but as we all know, it doesn't have a constitution. And this has been a matter of debate in recent years, as you know. And he gave he as a lawyer and dean of the Hebrew University Law School, he gave a presentation on that. And then there was a reply by Rolf Poscher, who also is a lawyer on the same topic of constitutional law, and talked about the Grundgesetz, about Germany that does have a constitution, and then the various constellations that follow from it. And then they started a dialogue. They didn't know each other before, and I'm very happy to announce that next week, actually, we will see the opening of the Max Planck Center for Democracy, Security and Human Rights in Jerusalem. It's for 5 years, with an extension by another 5 years, if all goes well. And it's funded with €1 million per year from both sides, matching funds. And I think that it is very fulfilling to see how such initial dialogues can actually lead to institutions. And much has been said about the creativity of Israeli science and the courage that they demonstrate. I mean, the Weizmann and Max Planck, we are about at the same level when it comes to scientific excellence, but when it comes to actually having the courage of taking ideas and turning them into products, perhaps making a startup, perhaps fail and try again. We have so much to learn from the Israeli spirit, and so the dialogue is beneficial for both sides.
Thank you very, very much. I think this was immensely insightful. I would like to go back to you, Dr. Shatiel, as I'd say the most Israeli on the panel, and ask you perhaps to reflect more specifically, also as an entrepreneur. And we've heard, and I was very happy and very flattered to hear that there are good aspects to Israelis. Believe me, I sometimes am looking for those very positive aspects and struggling to find them. But going back to you, Dr. Shatiel, what are the main benefits of collaborating both as an entrepreneur and as a researcher with the German institutions and German researchers?
So let's start with, we are bringing to the table the ideas, how we think out of the box, and Germany has the tools, the infrastructure, how to execute it. I don't think that I had such a variety of opportunity that I had here in Germany compared to Israel. Everything that I wanted to order in my lab, I could order, okay? There is no limit. If you want to do something, you will do it, okay? In Israel, you don't see this. You always try to keep the budget low, try to do it in different ways, but we need results, okay? So in my point, I think Germany, especially that is in Europe, this is the land of opportunity, not the US. And I do things because of our bond, okay? I wanted always to see Germany as a #1 ally of Israel, not the US, because we have much more to gain from each other than the connection with the US, for example. We have the history, we have the motivation to create innovation. We have based on technology, The Germans, I'm seeing it as a CEO of a company now, which is a publicly traded. German investors like technology. It's not just manipulation of finance. They are going to buy, as a retailer, shares that show technology, show aspects of new IP, something that come from the table and not just consumers of goods. So in this case, I think it's a great mixture. And I think more than that, in Germany, I felt that I can trust people. One of the examples, when you live in Munich, I don't see another underground or subway that works only on trust. I mean, there are no gates. You can enter to also in Berlin, there are no gates. It's not the subway of New York. But everything is based on trust. If somebody will catch you, this will be the best theater. Nobody wants to be caught by the police or the controller. So I just want to imagine if this system can work in Israel. I don't think so. And with that, you can create something big when you trust the other person and he trusts you. I think that's the very basic element that you need to create something new.
Yes.
Can I add something to this? Because I would like to follow up on something, not on the trust issue, but actually on the what you said about the infrastructure. Because maybe counteracting a bit my neighbors here, I want to make a case for bureaucracy. Maybe not bureaucracy, but what I wanted to say is actually I very much also enjoy collaboration with Israeli scientists precisely for the let's do attitude, the open and very robust discussion from the very beginning. But I also have come to appreciate that long-term programs that I understand that they can be a nuisance, they can be cumbersome. I have dealt with the paperwork, I have written the third version of an invitation letter to really satisfy the requirements. But then again, I think that these long-term programs are actually the backbone and the foundation on which long-term collaborations are built. And these are also counteracting like the short-termism that sometimes prevails or just goes on fashionable topics, where many of the research topics all of you mentioned, they require really years and sometimes decades of investment, and that doesn't work just with a go-to attitude. And I think that this combination of let's jump into it, let's do it, but also then having the infrastructure, having the long-term programs, which actually also allow for more robust discussion also of more problematic topics, because we know there is a basis on which we're doing this. So it's not really a case for bureaucracy. I just wanted to point out that there are actually advantages to having long-term programs that have been long in the making, and that makes me also swallow sometimes the paperwork.
Thank you very much. I think that these comments have been very insightful and helped us to complete a little bit the picture. If I am to quote something that Professor Lundberg said quietly here, it does lend to the thought that this is pretty much a very, very good match to be made. I perhaps will say a match made in heaven. So basically there's an Israeli, as I'm to quote one of the panel members, a no bullshit attitude, and we need to make do with what we have, and then we're going to get it done with a much more, first of all, much wider infrastructure, a much wider set of tools that is available, together with a very, very steady course and a very, I'd say, deep foundations that can create very significant structures. So the way that I found myself explaining it to people in the past was that Israelis have a very makeshift attitude, a MacGyver kind of attitude. We need to get it done. We're going to get it done with rubber band and scotch tape. We don't always necessarily go back to fix it afterwards. And Germans won't let that fly. Eventually, we can have it stand for a couple of minutes, but eventually we need to make it sturdy and steady, and that can create a very, very strong structure. But I do want to go back to something that I would really ask you to. I know it may be going a bit out of the comfort zone, but to reflect on. What are the things that Israelis should not bring to the table in that regard? Because yeah, the no bullshit attitude is wonderful, but it comes with few minuses. So it may not be. We may want to focus on the upside, but if I may drag you to think of one example of something that either something that you've experienced, that you've seen a colleague do, that you think, well, that is very Israeli, but maybe it's better if you leave it in Israel. So that I wouldn't direct to anyone in particular, but
they will never speak on that.
So yeah, but I'm Israeli, so I'll push them until.
But they will not answer you that. I mean, they will not answer you.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm thinking very hard.
You have to be a bit daring sometimes. No, just to quote Monty Python, don't mention the war. I mean, this is a joke. I think it's actually sometimes really good to go there and discuss our common history, and also discuss the experiences of, every individual that gets involved in these contexts has a reason. And it's sometimes also really good to see beyond this. I can also sense the spirit of the room, but just think about, if with our history, German and Israelis can actually build something productive. That's amazing, right? And that can also be a precursor, I hope, for other nations in the world, for other conflicts where you can say, yes, history has happened, but you have to, at some point, really try to constructively move beyond this. And thus does take sometimes, of course, taking personal responsibility for our history, for things that happened. So I don't think, it's ever good to act out of, or not speak up because you feel I'm afraid of the reaction I'm getting or the attitude I'm getting. So with my Israeli friends, I feel I can speak very open. And I usually have very honest, very truthful, very open discussion. Yeah? And I've been also in situations where you feel, yes, things can be tough, and sometimes it can be from confronting, but you have to go there. You have to go through vulnerability. You have to go through sometimes also heartfelt ache, in order to truly go beyond things that separate us or have separated us in the past. So,
Yeah, perhaps I can answer the question indirectly by saying that I got some training being married to an Italian from Tuscany that has suffered incredibly during the war, and where there were partisans. And when I saw my father-in-law for the first time, and I told him, my name is Ullmann, he said, what? And I said, Ullmann, and they said, I will call you Otto. And even years after, sometimes he looked at me, and we had become friends by then, he looked at me and said, che faccia di tedesco, what a German face. And my grandfather-in-law didn't come to our wedding because he was together with the Germans in Russia, and then in Russia the Italians turned against the Germans, and basically all of his close friends were killed by the Germans, and he somehow made it alone back to Italy, and just wasn't able to come to our wedding. We also later became friends, and then one day he went into the cellar, came back, and gave me a toolbox. And it turned out that he was a truck driver in Russia and had stolen this toolbox from a German because their tools were so much better. And he said, here, I give it back to you. So I had all this training before I went to Israel, and it served me well.
May I break the ice? maybe add to that something that's actually not me who coined it, but that happened on a panel discussion that I attended recently. That somebody said that science or academia is a space focused on work, focused on topics, very theme focused, but it's also social configuration. And sometimes it is very easy to focus on the topics, but sometimes the navigation of the social configuration needs some preparation in one way or the other. And this like acknowledgement of that this also needs attending, and that sometimes you have to take a detour first through social, then to science in order to properly work together. Maybe sometimes there could be some more preparation.
Thank you very, very much for your very frank answer. So if I am perhaps to bring it together, I would say that the advantages are very, very clear, but in order to make it a long-lasting partnership, it can't stay at the mutual advantages level, but it needs to go into another level, into a more personal level, and that actually takes a lot of maneuvering and both a sincere approach of challenging issues, but also bridging social differences and different approaches to different topics. And only once that happens, can there be a really strong, long-lasting partnership that would really go beyond the concrete collaboration? Would that be a fair description of some of the things that were said? Okay, yeah. So I did listen. Okay, that's good. It's good to know.
They still didn't. Oops, they didn't still answer your question.
I know, but they did their best.
Not to bring to the table. You saw.
Yeah.
But you are right about. I think especially Germans, from my experience, wants to build the relationship over time. It doesn't go like that, and the fact that your colleagues who next your bench next to you, work next to you, it will not create the connection that you want to bring. If we are talking about the relationship between Israel and Germany, we have all the tools to do it, but it takes time, a lot of trust, as I said before, and also from the Israeli side, as Israeli, I would say, not to be rude. Okay, one of the things that I came from Germany to Israel, and I had like a culture shock, although I was born in Israel. Everybody were too rude, okay? And I can say it because maybe, I'm Israeli, I could say it loud and open. You need to sometimes to take time, You want to run and to get all the subject and objective into place, but sometimes you need the time to build it. And if you do it step by step and creating the bricks to a long-term partnership, it will happen.
Thank you very, very much. Now, I think we'll put this topic to rest. I'd like to touch upon a very different question, and after that, maybe we'll take some questions from the audience. So what I'd like to ask you now, and as I said, in a very different level, is looking at the global challenges, scientific, technological research challenges, academic challenges. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that you would like to see German-Israeli partnership taking upon, and that you think that this collaboration can help solve? So, for example, Professor Lindberg already mentioned climate change and the collaboration with Ben-Gurion University. I think this is a wonderful example. So I'd like to ask you if you have other examples of that kind that you'd like to highlight.
So I think for security-relevant technologies, that's a big topic. I think moving forward, and especially in Germany, we do have this challenge at our research centers that we need to have a mindset change first of all, which we're now dealing with an internal task force. But we had the head of the defense committee from the Bundestag in Israel 2 weeks ago, and I just organized like an exchange just to make him acquainted with, Mafat for startups, with some of the companies, just to get a feel of how, this whole tech transfer works in Israel, and how we can maybe see where we can maybe share initiatives between ministries, where we can fund our own companies and the scientists who want to fund a company in Germany. And maybe this is also where I see maybe also a challenge moving forward, where we maybe bring together German and Israeli scientific companies to maybe see where we can maybe match founders. Because it's not just about investing in Israeli startups, obviously, but also because we have great companies here and scientists and share knowledge in this regard.
Yeah, I would like to come back to the foundation of this Max Planck Center for Democracy, Security and Human Rights in Jerusalem, because I think what we are witnessing is a period of history where the number of states that are making a transition from democracy to non-democratic forms of government far exceeds the number of states that are making the transition from an autocratic kind of government to a democracy. So we live in an era where democracy is under threat all over the world. And I think finding this combination of democracy, security, and human rights is a challenge for all of us. And so I do think that this is a topic that deserves, as Kerstin Pahl said, long-term thinking and engagement in order to counteract the tendency towards autocracy.
May I? Following up on this, and this is now speaking from experience, we not just the attending to the crisis of liberal democracies, but also to some specific challenges that come either with this crisis or maybe are also the driver of it. And this is the divide that exists in different countries. And we found out that we were talking about the metropolitan-rural divide across the world, like in India, for instance, but also in Germany, in Israel. And we found that there are some best practices from Europe, Germany, but also from Israel that can help non-European or countries from the global south to attend to similar problems, even though the societies are different, even though the context is different. But the rural metropolitan divide was similar in all of these countries, and I found that so in this case it was we were focusing on education, how to bring education to the more rural areas, and I found that in this case having Germany and Israel as a sort of hub that already connects Europe and with a not European country can actually help to think about what examples are already existing, that and then can maybe bring others to the table as well, which actually like contributes to strengthening political stability. And maybe just adding to that, I actually, together with Israeli colleagues, we developed a concept we called peer boosting. And what we meant by this is that we actually, as early career researchers or mid-career researchers, that we equip other early and mid-career researchers for working and doing research within the specific system that we don't know or that we know. So, and that we boost their ability to actually work more effectively, and this is one of the solutions that I wanted to propose, work more effectively within the system. And then we develop strategic partnerships between people who can then sort of facilitate the integration of global scholars within the system. And we thought that maybe this could also be extended not just to Germany and Israel, but also beyond, that we have sort of a peer boosting system that is not just top down, not just bottom up, but is actually on an equal level.
Thank you. So for the last few minutes of the panel, I'd like to perhaps open the stage for questions from the audience, hoping that you've listened very well now, that you're very curious about many things that were discussed, and given that you have this amazing panel at your disposal to ask questions. So if there are any questions, this would be a good time.
First of all, thank you all very much to all who were involved in making this evening possible, and to all the panelists. A question I would like to ask, as I'm a PhD student from Israel, I've just started my PhD in Germany. And often in my past experiences in collaborations in Germany, there is a certain dimension of imbalance, in a sense that it is often so that Israelis feel more, not necessarily comfortable, but it is logistically easier for Israeli scholars to come to Germany than the other way around. And I think that despite the sincere efforts in establishing a very well-balanced collaboration, it is often the case that Israelis are the one coming to Germany rather than it being the other way around, especially when it comes to longer stays, not just a conference or a short-term internship. And how would you think that it is the appropriate way to approach this problem, putting aside for a second the times in which security plays a role, but also even culturally, I do think that Israelis often feel a bit less foreign in Germany as Germans might feel in Israel. And I would like to hear your opinion on that matter.
This is a wonderful question.
Actually, when I look at one of the three pillars of the Minerva program, namely the stipend holders, which is not about PhD students, it's sometimes about PhD students, but it's also about postdocs. So both PhD students and postdocs. Are you part of a Minerva thing, or Marie Curie? So there actually the numbers, apart from the specific problems due to the pandemic and then October 7, the numbers are pretty equal. So, and I have had several lunches with the Minerva stipend holders, the German Minerva stipend holders in Israel, and my impression is that once you get them there, once you get them to Israel, and once they survive the first 2 weeks, they want to stay. So we had even problems. We offered them, for instance, we cannot require them to leave the country in a situation of war because they are not our employees. They have their stipends. They are completely free, and many of them actually did not want to leave, even in very difficult times. Didn't want to leave Israel. So I think from my perspective, it's more the initial hurdle. It's getting them there for the first time. And then when they are there, after a few weeks, they fall in love with the country. That's the experience that we have made.
I can actually second that from my experience, that there is a sort of hurdle that you have to overcome, and you better overcome it early. So we were thinking about already starting with students, like just making it, explaining that this, what I said about the normalcy, that this is a normal collaboration partner, and that this is one of the various destinations that you can actually go to, and just normalize having it as a research destination. And so we were thinking about who could actually, for instance, act as collaboration brokers. So who can facilitate this? Who has the expertise? And now I'm making a bit of maybe a case for the humanities, but I think that humanities scholars are very well equipped precisely for that, because they have been trained in addressing all difficult questions. And I always found that, and this was actually one aspect of this peer boosting that we called it, that we were thinking about having like regular for instance, online meetings where people can just drop in, like Cheltenham House rules, and let's see who would be interested in going there or just wants to ask questions they don't dare to ask anywhere else. And I think this is also a role for humanities scholars, that we could actually act as a collaboration brokers, because I totally agree. It's about going there for the first time, and then it just happens.
Stefan Reinsch from Germany. I would like to ask you to follow on this question a bit further. So many of us are middle-aged careers. Also, we are junior scientists. We are already middle-aged. Many of us have families. So I do have a wife and children, and I have 2 collaboration partners in Israel, one in Tel Aviv, one in Beersheba. And if I wanted to go, I would have to convince my family to go. So, putting this question to you, how would you convince your partner to...
Let's have the big lawyer first, I would say.
Exactly. I think this would just mean opening up the circle in terms of knowledge about the region. So if you're going to the US, nobody will question that you can actually bring your family, and or Britain, or and I think that the first reaction would be, can I really bring my family there? That this would actually be something that definitely need addressing. And maybe Ullmann Lindenberger can say something on, or maybe not, but this question of not just dual career, but maybe also dual movement or collaborative movement of a family, I think that needs addressing in general. And this can definitely be made part of it, that you think about not just going yourself, but also bringing your family, which is actually part of a broad discussion that we're having in academia anyway. That so we have, as humanities scholar, often the problem that for us 3 months stays are mostly too long if we have family. We need sometimes just 2 weeks to go to a library or something, but there are hardly any stipends for that. So this could very well be connected to a broader discussion of how you actually combine family and academic career, but then also bring in security questions, because this is basically what is actually asked about that. And if you have like experts, for instance, in one of those digital meetings where you have experts speaking specifically on the role of the family, childcare, security. What do you need to know if you go there with dependents? I think this would be very, very helpful, and would then also help to convince the family, I'd say.
I think this will be, well, the last 2 questions. So what we'll do is we'll take both questions, and then the panel can answer them. And because we are running short in time, and you don't want to keep the rest of the schedule late.
So again, from one elephant in the room to another. So the current war, the war that had happened in the last 2 years in Israel, in Gaza, and we see that we've addressed this already. The standing of Israel has been deteriorating, and more than that, visibility of not only Israeli science but Israelis in Europe has been erased. Right. So even in Germany, although the situation in Germany is better than other countries, still it's tough. Like you cannot have an Israeli stand or an Israeli whatever. You'll immediately be interrupted or cancelled, right? And considering the special relations of Israel and Germany, I would like to hear from you what could be done about this, because we know that Israel science, Israel academia is actually a stronghold for democracy. So how can Germany support Israeli sciences and academy?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, and it starts really with the way how honest and open we are with ourselves. And I think what is important is to recognize the difference between anti-Semitism directed against Israel, that comes in various forms, like in the way in which the word Zionism is used, the way in which the word genocide is used, and also just as a general way of portraying Israelis as the generalized alien, so to say, very much in the way it's done with the word Jews. So there is anti-Semitism directed against Israel, and I think it's important to talk about it and to make people recognize it. And there's also what I would call legitimate concerns and critique of actions of the Israeli government that I think are legitimate, just as any criticism against any other government. And I think it's extremely important to make people aware that these are different things, and that some of them fall in the trap of anti-Semitism directed against Israel without even noticing, because the language offers us anti-Semitism all the time. There are figures of thoughts, figures of speech that have a long tradition, and one has to raise awareness within one's own institution day by day in order to overcome the slow increase in anti-Semitism that has been taking place in the last few years. And I see this as a very big problem, and it's a problem that we really should ask ourselves: are we doing enough to keep our language alert for what is going on?
Yes. This is now personally speaking from having had loads of these discussions, especially in the humanities. So what I found works really well are very intense get-togethers that are in the beginning safe spaces where people can voice concerns, opinions, and just talk about things that are on their mind. Because one difficulty that we're actually finding is, seconding Ullmann here, is that sometimes you're lacking a language to really address what you want to address. There's something you want to say, but then people are hesitant because they think they are not really knowledgeable about the words, or are afraid to address something difficult in one or the other direction. And what I once attended was like a 2-day workshop that really cut to the chase, where you could actually ask anything, and afterwards you felt better equipped to confront these issues in an institutional setting. So again, a sort of knowledge boosting and also sort of language boosting, where you learn about it and where you can then also feel more secure about yourself. This is very much on a personal level. I don't know if your question goes also to an institutional level.
Level and more to the institutional level, and in the sense that again I think you cannot have an Israeli lecturer coming invited and announces in Israeli and not expect it not to be interrupted or cancelled, right? So that's, how do you address that? I mean, I feel we need to have Israeli visibility, right, as a legitimate thing in Germany and in Europe, of course, and in the world.
Okay, I may have slightly misunderstood your question because I was primarily talking about the German the problems of separating anti-Semitism directed against Israel from critique of the Israeli government in a legitimate form. When it comes to your issue, I just think there should be no compromise. We have to treat our Israeli colleagues just as any other colleagues. There must be no hesitation in collaboration. And I know from my own experience that the scientists in Israel I'm working with on a daily basis, and the institutions and so on of science in Israel, they also have reservations against some of the things that are happening. And the best thing we can do is to continue collaboration. And that, of course, includes inviting Israeli colleagues and so on. And I'm very happy that the president of the institution I'm a member of, namely the Max Planck Society, Patrick Kramer, that he's very clear about this, and that he has also been very vocal about this and has made this point several times.
I think also from the perspective of the individual researchers, it's very important that you know that the institutional heads have your back, and that they, yeah.
So, yeah, one very last question. Yes.
So I'm not Israeli and I'm not German. Yeah. So my name is Mustafa. I'm a postdoc at the German Primate Center, and I'm from Egypt. Yeah. And I think if I hadn't come to Germany, I would have never met an Israeli. You know, I would have never known about what's happening in Israel in terms of science and technology. I would have probably also never wanted to, because the level of indoctrination there and the social pressure is very heavy. So I think I consider myself lucky that I came here, and that was actually my window to Israel and to Israelis and to Israeli scientists and science. And I've also noticed that recently a lot of students from the Middle East, from Egypt as well, they come to Germany. Germany has become like a hub of students, people who want to do their postgraduate studies. So I was wondering, what can we do through the German Israeli Foundation, through the German government and ministry, and you know, the organizations that are involved in this, to kind of like use this opportunity to bridge the gap between students from the Middle East, people who kind of a little bit more open-minded, they are educated, they are seeking postgraduate studies, but then we want to make them overcome these barriers that they grew up with, to kind of get involved with Israelis and to know more about Israel, and then use this opportunity to kind of like bring them both together here in Germany. So what can we do about that?
I think
so I have at least kind of a good example what we're doing now with KIT, with our Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. So we have a new partnership with Hassoub, which is like an Arab innovation center in Israel. You know, we just started, you know, by bringing now two master students to the KIT. It's a fellowship. They had to, you know, apply via their university, which was the University of Haifa and the Technion. And what we're now trying to do, because they now successfully started, and because at KIT we had lots of boycotts as well, and we're trying, together with the president, we're trying to address this problem by exactly wanting to do this. And this is what we're now looking at with students. And it's going to be an experiment, but I think it's important that we just show there's also, you know, Arabs in Israel. You know, we're trying to bridge this gap. We want to bring them together, and we would just open the dialogue. And I think being authentic is like really key here, because if, you know, we address this and not just whitewashing, just say, hey, we have like Arabs in Israel, but also, you know, sharing their perspective, see what we can do, and just being very open about it, you know, and then also the same, you know, and at the same time, just showing them, yeah, but we're working with, you know, it's like Israelis, it doesn't matter if they're Muslim, if they're Jew, Christian, whatever. But I think this is very, very good question and very important to move forward.
The challenge that we have is that I suspect that everybody would like to answer this question.
First of all, to your questions, I was at the scholarship. One of the things that I got there is actually a mixture with other students from all over the world, so this exists. What we can do, part of GIF, is actually to send Germans or German students that from Egypt, for example, here, for a scholarship in Israel, okay, to get to know even better what's going on in Israel, because he knows now Israel and history and get to know more Israelis from living here in Germany, but he actually can come to Israel and visit us.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I do want to ask maybe a brief answer, because what we'll give the last words to our colleague, an honorary member of the panel for the sake of this question, Gabriela Armani from the BMFTA, who I think could expand a little more on what the German government is already doing on that. But right after Professor Unke.
I just wanted to personally thank you for coming here, making this comment, because ultimately, I see humanity as a whole. We have global problems to solve, and very much like a personal experience, when you look beyond the borders, the indoctrinations, the religions, everything that maybe, you see directly around you, it usually opens the horizon to start to see everything as a global community that is deeply connected, where we have a common responsibility to act for change. And as you say, right, there are few places in the world, but also these places become fewer and fewer, where true international collaboration is still possible. I mean, just look at the shutdown of the United States, right? The leader of the free world. This is an example of what could happen pretty much everywhere, and it really takes courage to stand up against those movements and those developments. And it also, I think, takes courage to sometimes say that we all have to move beyond, history and doctrines and everything in order to actually create a better future that is sustainable for all of humanity. So, yeah, and thank you for the comment, because we will take that up in the GIF to think a bit about how maybe the example, right, through GIF, through all these foundations of rebuilding German-Israeli relationships, how that could actually be a predecessor for also helping from our experience and helping out creating and helping to rebuild other relationships and relationships between other nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gabriela.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to add something. Thank you for your question and for the courage to ask it. I would like to tell you how we deal with it, actually, but there's a very long tradition in the German government to try to bring together Israeli scientists, German scientists, and scientists from the region around Israel. So this long tradition kind of stopped 23, before it was also not easy. But we, in the ministry, we have another department, a division, which is responsible for the regional, the countries around Israel. So we work together, they and our department. And for example, we financed a seminar in Hamburg around the Sesame project in Jordan, which is a collider, and where countries like Iran, Israel, Pakistan working together scientifically. And in this workshop, it was really impressive. All these scientists from these countries were sitting and discussing their issues side by side. So these things we try. And of course, in all our programs like Martin Buber and GIF, as you heard, we always try to bring in, please, also in Israel. We have I think, you know it better, how many % of the population is from an Arabic background.
In Israel in general or in Jerusalem?
Yeah,
And in these programs, for example, at Hebrew University, it is very important for us also that these students are also in our programs. So I think we do what we can, but of course there can be done more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as we're coming to the conclusion of this panel, obviously there are many, many more things that can be said. I think that the last question that was asked, and thank you very much for that, I think is a very good point to conclude, as I think it pinpoints what we're all about ultimately. I think the conclusion of everything said on this panel is that the foundation of a very strong relationship on any level, and not excluding scientific and research collaboration, is to understand the qualities that each partner brings to the table, to understand what are the advantages, but in order to make a long-lasting partnership, to see each other as friends, because on top of that foundation, we can really create a long-lasting relationship that would stand for many, many years and would eventually benefit not only us here in this room, not only us here in Germany or in Israel, but us here in this world. So thank you very, very, very much.
I know that everyone are very thirsty, so we'll be very Israeli and make some noise, and we'll give you some bottle of water. So I'm sorry for the noise that we will make while Verena is calling for the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for this really honest discussion, for your insights, sharing your experiences, and we will have later plenty of time for more questions. It looked like this panel could have gone on for way longer. We're going to start now with our first lecture, and I would like to welcome Professor Yossi Yovel. While Yossi is setting up the computer, I will just introduce him briefly. Yossi is Professor Yovel is the head of the Lab of Neuroecology at Tel Aviv University. Yes. And we're going to get back to the term neuroecology in a few. He holds 2 bachelor degrees in biology and physics. He did his master's in neurosciences and his PhD in the University of Tübingen, getting back to Germany, making the connection here in biology and machine learning. After 2 postdocs at the Weizmann Institute and the University of Chicago, he joined Tel Aviv University in 2011. And his research combines biology with technology. He's working on bat biosonar that has driven the development of a bat-like autonomous robot, which navigates autonomously using sound only. His work on bats' use of biosonar for navigation in parallel to using MRI to study bats' brains in the lab made him establish a total new field called neuroecology. And I would like your attention now when Yossi is going to explain to us about neuroecology, neurosciences, and ecology in combination. Thank you, Yossi, for being with us.
Thanks, and hi everyone. I want to start with my personal experience, my German experience. So as was already kindly said, I did my PhD in Germany. I came to Tübingen in 2005. Somebody today earlier said it's a city that looks like it was built by fairies, if you haven't visited yet. In 2005, there were not many Israelis coming to Europe in general and to Germany specifically. I think I was one of the only Israelis in town. Most Israelis went to the US. Still, I think most, but it has changed. And for me, it was an eye-opening experience. I found myself surrounded by young students, Germans, students from all over Europe. Erasmus was very strong, I guess it still is. Many Arabs, by the way. Many of my best friends were from Syria, from Iraq, from Jordan. I was exposed to a way of living that I was never exposed to before. I became a Germanophile and a Europhile, whatever file, something with file. And I still am. And during this entire afternoon, I was thinking of an example to explain what do I like about Germany so much, and then you gave me this beautiful example, okay? Who would have thought of printing the agenda on the back side of a name tag, right? So simple, so elegant, so smart. Okay, so I have a lot of slides, and there's no reason to go through all of them. I just want to give you a taste of some of the things that we think about and work on today, and maybe to intrigue you and maybe to get you to ask me questions later on. So during the 20th century, again and again, scientists came up with definitions of what makes us human. Okay, every time they would come up with a new cognitive capacity that is unique to humans and other animals don't have it. So famously in the 60s, the early 60s, when Jane Goodall found that chimps can actually use tools, her supervisor at the time, Louis Leakey, wrote her, that's what she says at least, now we must redefine tool, redefine man, or accept chimpanzees as human. So I think today, less than looking for this gap, we are more focusing on trying to measure the similarities between us and other animals. And that's one of the things I'm mostly interested in today. Now, there is one thing that humans clearly excel at, and that is planning. Okay? The benefits of planning are clear, right? There's a huge benefit of fitness if you can anticipate and plan ahead rather than if you're just responding to stimuli in the environment, right? Now, in order to plan, and by the way, humans have this what we sometimes refer as mental time travel capacity, right? We can position ourselves at a different location at a different time from now and imagine exactly what we're going to do. Maybe some of you are already doing this right now. So in order to plan, we must have some kind of model, okay? Some kind of representation of mental representation, cognitive representation of the world. It can be something very simple. I don't know, yeah, you can see my cursor. Something very simple like, it's going to be dark. There is light now, and it's going to be dark later. And I can be a very simple sessile organism. Or it can be something simple like, in order to reach my nest, I need to walk when the sun is on the right. Or it can be a higher level mental representation, such as how do I cluster different types of Chinese dumpling courses in a restaurant. And I was actually witnessed a very long discussion about how are these clustered recently. So this is also a mental representation, a model, okay? Now, the best studied, the best understood mental representation in the brain, human brain, vertebrate brain, is the spatial map, the spatial representation. Very, very briefly, I'll say that we know that probably all vertebrates, it hasn't been shown in all vertebrates yet, but probably all vertebrates have cells that represent space, where we are in space, cells that, these are called grid cells, and this is, by the way, Nobel Prize-winning work. Cells that represent something about the direction and the speed in which we're moving, cells that represent the borders of the world, cells that represent the target that we're heading towards, and cells that represent our heading, our angle, allocentric angle in space. Okay, so we know quite a lot about how the brain, the mental representation of space in the brain, and we also have accumulating evidence. I don't have time to go over these examples in thorough, but we have accumulating evidence that this same system, the same neurons that I showed you before, can also represent other mental maps, such as an acoustic map. So this is a rat navigating through frequency, and the same cells, the place cells that usually encode space, will now encode frequency. And this is a very complicated experiment because it's a human fMRI experiment, so I can't go into the details, but basically they show that the same grid cells represent a semantic map. So you see these birds figures, they change their length and the size of the length of their neck and of their legs, and the same, again, the same neurons facilitate this mental representation, and the same system can also probably represent social maps. So that's another type of mental representation, right? Who are my friends? What are the relationship between my friends? Okay, these are all models of the world. Now, this is our take, my take on this. How do we study this? So I said we know quite a lot about the brain. Somewhat ironically, we don't know so much about what's going outside. And the reason for that is we cannot study the same animals over very long periods, and it's very hard to track animals outside. Okay, so this, by the way, this is a 6-gram bat. It's called Pipistrellus cooley, and it's 6 grams. That's the adult weight. Okay, so think of the size of the device that you have to put on this bat in order to track it. So indeed, that's what one of the things that my lab does, is to build these very, very small devices. By the way, this is a big device. This device weighs 1.5 grams, but it's too big for that bat. And our devices, I like to say, we put the lab on the bat. Okay, so we can track the bats. You can see a swarm of bats exiting from a cave over here. We can measure body temperature, physiological data, acceleration down here, other types of physiological measurements such as ECG, EEG, ambient parameters such as ambient temperature. This is us measuring ambient temperature using the bats as our agents. So we have the temperature sensors on the bats, but we're actually interested in mapping the environment. Okay, so these are all sensors that we can place on the bats. By the way, it's all it's all highly non-invasive, and of course we try to interfere with the bat as little as possible. I'll explain a little bit more later on. But in this case, in this study, we're interested in how the animal represents the world. So we also have to have a map of the sensory input available to the bat. Now, I forgot to say, these are echolocating bats, right? So they use sound in order to orient. They also see, all of them have vision, okay? But actually, the main question we're interested in this study is whether they can create sound-based or echoic mental representations of a large-scale environment. Okay, we know that bats can fly in a small room. That's what my mentor doing my PhD, that's his whole career in Tübingen University, Professor Hans-Ulrich Schlitzler, did. We know that in a small room, a bat can map space with a millimeter resolution. Okay, but can they do this with in a kilometer large space outdoors? So this is how we acquire sensory information. Today we can create very, very high-resolution 3D maps of the environment, and then using acoustic simulations and the students, these are the PhD students who've done all of this fantastic work. So using acoustic simulations, we can actually simulate the echoes returning from each position in the world. Okay, I don't have too much time, but actually, it's easier to simulate the acoustic world than the visual world. If you think of a visual animal, right, there are many questions that are related. Of course, there's where is it pointing the head? That's a huge question. Okay, but beyond that, where is it pointing the eyes, and where is it focusing? Right, I can now look in this direction and acquire this information a meter ahead of me, or I can be acquiring information 50 meters ahead of me. And if I'm just tracking the animal, how do I know? Okay, with the acoustics, again, without going into all details because of the attenuation and so on, I can know probably with much more certainty what information is available to the bat. Okay, so now we have a huge acoustic map with millions of echoes from a very large environment. And I hope this will play with sound, and we can create. This is just for your impression. We can have a look at what kind of echoes a bat would receive when flying in this kind of environment. Do we hear? No. No sound, so I will have to imitate. So now we're hearing something like okay, so it's a very complex environment. You can see the echoes appearing down here. There's a lot of information. The echoes are superpositions of a lot of echoes. And now the bat suddenly is flying above a very, very boring, this is a field, okay? And actually, I wanted to mimic this part too. So once it's arriving at the field, notice that the echoes below, now the echoes are very complex, a lot of echoes, okay? And in a second, the bat will be flying above the field, and this becomes a very boring environment from a sensory point of view. Nothing is changing. Look at the echoes. Basically, it's getting one echo from the ground, okay? So tuck, 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 something like that. Much faster. They're emitting at 20 hertz, 20 times per second. Okay? Of course, this is all during the dark period of the day, but right, just for you to see. Okay, so the first thing we do is a behavioral experiment. And this is work by Aya Goldstein, who is, by the way, today in Max Planck in Constance. And what Aya did is she did a classical translocation experiment. So you take the animal, you translocate it several kilometers, and you see if it can return to its roost. This suggests that it has some kind of a map of an environment. But as I said, we're interested in acoustic map. Okay, so what do? We cover the eyes of the bat. Okay, again, we're using felt. We take all cautions to make sure that we're not interfering with the animal. We make sure first in the lab that the animal, once it lands, it can remove this felt and continue in its normal life. But during its return to the roost, if it doesn't land, this means that it's doing it based on acoustics only, okay? And what we find is that the animal indeed can do this, okay? The animals can go back and home back from several kilometers up to 4 kilometers using acoustics only. We also eliminate other sensory input. Again, I don't have time to go into all details. What we also find using our acoustic model is that the environment is very rich in acoustic information, which can be site-specific. Okay, so we see here two types of map. The map up here is the acoustic entropy. Okay, this translates each echo and at each location into one number, so we can make a map, right? So you could think of this as more information. Okay, when it's red, there is more acoustic information. When it's white, there's less acoustic information. So you can see that the fields, as I explained before, are very boring in terms of information. Nothing is changing. There's not much information. Water is the same. Water surfaces are also very boring. But you know, if you look at the slopes, or the orchards or areas that are on the sides of the roads, that's where you have a lot of acoustic information. And we show that the bats prefer to navigate along these trajectories, okay? So they select trajectories, they navigate back using trajectories that are rich in acoustic information. I think that I will end here. I think I gave you a taste of what we're working on. The next step is now to use a neural network in order to train a completely naive neural network based on its self-experience in the world to perform bat-like navigation. That's what we're working on these days. I just want to, this will not play probably, let's see. Okay, I'll have to mimic this as well. Or I can do this, and now it will probably play. Oh, or maybe not. 1 second, this is strange. Okay. I thought I'm missing something. Okay, so what you saw before, and it's not important to see, are the images. This is actually part of my PhD work in Tübingen, where we had a robot-like, a bat-like robot. I used to walk with it outside, place it instead in front of different trees, and collect and record the echoes. You can't imagine the kind of questions that I got from habitants in Tübingen, and my German was not very good at the time, but I found interesting explanations to what I'm doing. And I want to play back to you, okay, just that you get a feeling of what it means to listen to the world, to build a map based on sound. I want to play back to you an apple tree first. This is an apple tree. Wait, that's not an apple tree. Okay, of course I have to change the frequencies, otherwise you would not hear anything because this is ultrasonic. And this is a cornfield. Okay, and I have no doubt that you can all now, most of you can now already distinguish between the two. Okay, so what is this? Cornfield, exactly. So you're all trained bats now, and thank you very much. So we have time for 1, 2? Okay, so we have time for questions. Yeah.
I heard recently that when they hunt, I heard recently it was a scientific idea. Bats hunt, and they hunt for birds. And I wonder, is sound also playing a role? And I want to add the comparison. They hunt like if we would jog and catch a deer and eat it while jogging. So I wonder if bats detect these birds by sounds?
Yeah, so these are two questions, I think. Okay. First, regarding eating while jogging, yes, bats eat while jogging, definitely. I always say, you know, bats shout up to 100 times per second while jogging. Okay, so try shouting twice per second while you're jogging. That's one thing I always recommend, students to try. And another thing that I've also tried many times myself, but I don't recommend is sometimes when bats are flying, they will call as little as once per second. So try riding your bike, you know, and open it, don't do it, okay? And opening your eyes once per second just to acquire information about the environment. But back to the other story. Actually, it's a sad story. That's one of the worst scooping I've ever had. We were supposed to go to Nepal. We are going to Nepal in March to study bats that hunt birds. But these are very good colleagues of mine, some of them German, by the way. So I'm really happy. And if indeed what they've shown, I'll just explain to everyone, they managed to record. We know that bats hunt birds. This has been known. We know it based on feces analysis. But they have actually managed to record with a microphone on the bat, which is what we also do, the actual event. So you hear some kind of a collision, and then you hear a bird probably being eaten. Does this happen? These are probably nocturnal bats, birds that are performing their nocturnal migration, small birds. Okay, so whether they are detected based on the calling of the birds, or does sound, active echolocation play a role is actually the question that we're interested in, and I don't think that they've answered it. They showed an anecdote where it happens. I think we don't yet know, at least they haven't said if they have data about that. Yeah, so it's an open question. We do know that bats will combine passive listening. For example, frog-eating bats will use their passive hearing to detect frogs, and then they will use echolocation to home in on the frog. So they will combine both senses, modalities. Yeah, there's a question over there.
Why do they prefer to go to the more to the route where they have to have more echoes rather than the boring route? So yeah, that's a bit odd, because I would say that's mentally more overbearing.
Yeah. So imagine that you're flying above a lake, okay, and once you reach the beginning of the lake, you know you're heading, you know that the target is over there, okay. But now, I don't know, you flew for 3 kilometers and you see nothing but a flat lake. Okay, that's the equivalent. Very quickly you will lose your heading, probably, right? We're very bad, that's called path integration, we're very bad in maintaining a heading without some external cues. So very, very quickly you will start meandering and find yourself maybe even flying backwards. Okay, so you do want to have some information, and that's what they're doing. By the way, I didn't say optimizing information, because they're not. So what we found is that the trajectories are rich information more than a straight line, for example, but they're not, if you know, a maximum information trajectory would suggest maybe doing something very, very indirect, which is inefficient. So it's somewhere in the middle. There was another question, if we have time, over there in the back. One last question, okay, in the back.
I really like your talk.
Thank you.
I really like your talk. So one question, as humans, we have this ability to autopilot, wherein I can just navigate my way. If I've gone somewhere once, I can always just go back without really thinking. Do bats have this same ability? And if they do, how will it affect your acoustic measurements?
So they do. This is called sometimes spatial memory, and actually there's some experiments where people placed obstacles in the way of a bat that is doing the same, flying exactly the same route day after day, and they will collide sometimes. How will it affect? Okay, so that's an interesting question I need to think about. But one thing that I can say, bats change the rate with which they call. So when they detect an obstacle, they will increase the rate. So for example, and we actually did some experiment that is a little bit along these lines. We can actually say whether the bat collided with this new obstacle that I mentioned, with or without detecting it. Okay, so actually because they emit sound, I have this capability of looking into their perception and saying whether, or at least detection, and saying whether they responded to the obstacle or whether they collided without any response. Acoustic response, echolocation response, I mean. So actually I could maybe address this question. It's an interesting question. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Yovel. By the way, as much as I would like to take the credit for that, that's an Israeli invention. So we're changing fields now, and we continue with Professor Johanna Erzberger. Johanna is coming over. Johanna Erzberger studied in Mainz, Jerusalem, and Münster, and received her doctorate in 2009 from Salzburg, Austria. She did a dissertation on the intersection of biblical and Jewish studies, and held several teaching positions over the last years, including at the Catholic University of Paris, the University of Pretoria in South Africa, Cardiff University, and Bar-Ilan. from 2019 to 25, she served as the Dean of Students and held the DAAD-funded Laurentius Klein Chair at the Theological Study here in Jerusalem, a truly unique program. And since 2025, she holds the newly established DAAD Chair for Israel Studies at Hebrew University. Johanna, the stage is yours.
There should be a presentation. Is it coming or do I have to initiate it from here? I don't know. So I gave it to him, so I don't know. How do I access it? No, this is not mine. That's on the computer here. How do I access the presentation? Sorry? No, it's connected now, but I don't know where I find my presentation. All right, I will take this one. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I was thinking about what to do, what to present, and during the last couple of years I've actually worked on something totally different on the book of Jeremiah, text critical, redaction critical issues, but I thought that's pretty dry material for an audience that's not from the field. So what I'm going to present here now is something I've been starting to work on recently that I would like to continue working on, and it might be a nice topic for this venue because a colleague from Hebrew University, actually myself, while I was not yet working there, we were thinking about applying for funding from JIF, and it turned out it wasn't possible because me working in Israel for financed by the DAAD, but connected to a Roman institution at that point, my chair was connected there, did turn out not to be German enough for that. So still hope that we find a way to continue to work on that. Memorial landscapes is something that you could talk about, obviously not only connected with places in Israel, but you've got them all over. But it might be a specific interesting topic there because it's so nicely complicated. You have not just well, you have memorial landscapes that are connected to different religious communities. You've got memorial landscapes that are interconnected, that are shared or contested, that influence each other, that borrow from each other, that forget about each other. And I've chosen one place that might be known to at least some of you, this one. That is the Tomb of David on the right-hand side, two pictures that I just took 2 days ago myself. And on the left-hand side, it's photos from the Room of the Last Supper, just above. May I ask who has ever been there? Okay, so quite some of you. It's an interesting place. Because it connects traditions from different religious communities, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. And it is a place that is not, and you see that on the, maybe I stay with the pictures for a moment. You see on the right-hand side the Tomb of David with a cenotaph. That is marking the place where the burial place of David is imagined. And I would like you to keep in mind for a bit later the niche that you see behind that cenotaph. You could also, or there are some reminders of that also. This place used to be a Muslim place because on the other side of the if you're turning your back to the cenotaph and are looking to the other direction, you would have a mihrab, which according to what I know is covered up. I couldn't check it because that's the men's section, and for obvious reasons I couldn't take a photo there or have a look. On top of that, the room of the Last Supper, and there you clearly see the mihrab on the right-hand side. Actually, the only element that reminds us or makes sure that it was a Christian place at a certain point is the capital that I made a photo of too, which shows a bird, a pelican, who's killing himself in order to give his blood to his youngsters. And this is obviously something that's not happening in nature, but that became a symbol for Christ sacrificing his life. I would guess that most, or even Christian pilgrims who come to that place don't recognize it as a Christian symbol. Now the question is, how did those traditions end up at this specific place? And in particular with both traditions, it's not logic. With regard to the tomb of David, it's not logic at all because it's built on a phrase in 1 Kings 2. Then David slept with his ancestors, and I put the Hebrew there too because most of you were able to read that, and was buried in the city of David. Now the city of David is clearly not where the tomb of David is remembered now. The city of David would be, I don't know if I can point somewhere there. Well, you see it. You have a map of the old city today, just to give you an orientation. And I have I've marked the place where the city of David, where also excavations have been taking place and so on, is. In Christian times, the terminology of Mount Zion went to the place where the tomb of David is remembered now. This is clearly not the place where a historical David would have been buried. Actually, during the Byzantine time, there is another tradition of where David was buried, and that is Bethlehem. Because Bethlehem is connected with the figure of David as the city of David, as where he came from. And we have some Christian, it's mostly Christian memories that kind of put him there. Eusebius in the Nomasticon writes, Bethlehem, the city of David and the territory of Judah, is distant from Aelia. Aelia is the name for the Roman city, Aelia Capitolina, for Jerusalem, 6 miles to the south on the road leading to Hebron. There one is shown the tombs of Jesse and David. So for a very long time, the tomb of David was absolutely not connected with the place where it is now. We have different contesting traditions, and the question is now, how did it get there? Traditions that are older and that are connected with the place are a couple of Christian traditions, which are, I must make that clear also, are also not in any way proven. And they are developed in the 4th century mainly, and that's a time when pilgrimage starts, Christian pilgrimage in the Holy Land, and lots and lots of places have traditions that start around that time. You have on the right-hand side the foundation walls of the tomb of David, and everything that is black is part of the oldest part of the building. There have been some excavations done. It's one of those places where you can't excavate easily, obviously, because it's places that are in use. And, well, try to imagine one would try to dig on the Temple Mount or the Haram, and this is not as sensitive, but sensitive enough. So basically all excavations that have been done at the chamber of, at the tomb of David itself happened in the early 50s, when after the foundation of the state, there were some renovations done, and there were some some excavations done in that context. And these black parts are the oldest parts of the building and are late Roman probably. And you have then a time when the Tomb of David and the Room of the Last Supper were part of a church. The Hagia Sion, which was most likely built in the 4th century. It's not quite clear. It's once again around the time when all the pilgrimage started, because we have only some far later from the 6th, 7th, 8th century, some sources that tell us about when it was built that are not totally in tune. But we do have some excavations that show some parts of it, and they are under what is now the Domitian Abbey. That's the place where I used to work for 6 years, so it was right next door. And you can see some of the excavations if you go into the foundations, into the cellar of the abbey now. The abbey was built at the end of the 19th century. It was a gift of the Turkish Sultan to Wilhelm II. Wilhelm II built churches everywhere where Constantine built churches, which tells a bit about what he considered himself to be. Protestant churches, the Christmas church in Bethlehem, the Redeemer's Church next to the Holy Sepulchre, and on the Mount of Olives, the Augusta Victoria. And gave this compound to the Catholic Church in order to show that he was the emperor of the Catholics too. And while the Domitian Abbey was built, there were some excavations done that showed some part of the Middle-aged church, of the Byzantine church. And it's the part on the, if you see the map of the church, then you have some parts that are hard to discern. Number 2, and these are the parts of or part of those walls belong to the Byzantine Church. And in the left-hand side corner down, you have some leftovers of the Crusaders' Church, which was built on the foundations of the Byzantine Church, and there are even people who say probably the Byzantine Church wasn't totally destroyed, and the Crusaders just kind of renovated it and prolonged it. So what is now the Tomb of David and the chamber of the Last Supper was part of the Byzantine and later of the Crusaders' Church. You can see the Byzantine Church on the Madaba card on the map. It's a mosaic in Madaba in Jordan. But whoever has spent some time in Jerusalem has seen probably a picture of that part of the mosaic in the Cardo in the Old City. And you can see the Cardo, you can see the Damascus Gate, it's called Bab al-Amud in Arabic today still, which means the gate of the column, and you see a column there. And on the right-hand side, you see here inside at the end of the Cardo, but seemingly still inside the walls, you have a church. Every churches have red roofs in this mosaic, and this church is usually identified with the Hagia Sion, and you have right of that church a small building that is hard to identify, and there have been theories that say, okay, this actually was the Room of the Last Supper, Tomb of David building that was not part of the church at the beginning, was standing next to it. The archaeology does not argue in that direction. However, and that's a nice example for how people inscribe themselves and their own history into history and remembered history, on the left-hand side down, you have the foundations of the Byzantine and the Crusaders' Church, and you see in black the Byzantine Church, and you see that the modern church of the Domitian is right left hand of it, right? Can you see that? In the 1980s, when the Domitian, the monastery, not the church, was enlarged, there were some excavations done again. And building on the earlier excavations, there was a theory that one of the monks, Bagel Pixner, was supporting for the rest of his life also, that considered that the Byzantine Church was actually a bit to the left from the Crusaders' Church, which has the advantage that it would cover the place of the Domitian Church. So if you follow this theory, and they argued also with the Madaba map, because you've got this nice second building right of the right-hand side of the Byzantine Church. There are several traditions connected with the room of the Last Supper and the tomb of David below. It is supposed to be the seat of the first bishop, James, who's supposed to be a brother of Jesus. This is the oldest tradition actually connected that we can prove from sources. Then you have the descent of the Holy Spirit. Then you have the tomb of St. Stephen, and you have the Last Supper, which is mostly remembered today, and then the death of Mary, that's mostly connected with the Domitian Church next door. You don't have, for a long time, the tomb of David. The earliest traditions that are connected with the tomb of David actually turn up in the 10th century, and it's a Muslim source that blames the Christians for it. The Church of Zion was mentioned by David, may he rest in peace. They, the Christians, believed that the tomb of David was there. And then you have the first Jewish source talking about it in 1160, Benjamin of Tudela, who is important for other places too. Sorry, I will have, yeah. And he says on Mount Sinai, the sepulchres of the house of David and the sepulchres of the kings that ruled after him, the exact place cannot be identified. So he's very skeptical. What we do have is a Christian memorial service for King David and James that connect the two of them. So I said that was the place of the first bishop. And this memorial service now makes a connection between King David as founder of Zion, of the city of Zion, and James as the founder of the Christian church. And that might be the originating point. Obviously something I can't prove, but that's one theory that connects the both. I will come to the modern times. In modern times, after the creation, after the founding of the state, the tomb of David is basically one of the few places that can be accessed from Israel, from within the state of Israel, and it's the closest to come to the Temple Mount. You've got a visual there. And that made the Director General of the Ministry of Religion, Shmuel Zangwili Kahane, not to be confused with another Kahane, to very much push this place. You've got the President's room on top of the chamber of the Last Supper, and you have a close connection to the chamber of Holocaust. Okay, I cut it here. Sorry, I thought I was.
I'm very sorry for interrupting you here at that point. Johanna, we're a bit behind time. So I would suggest just if there's questions to Johanna, please keep them in mind. There's time for more discussions during the reception, if that's okay.
Of course, that's okay.
Great. Thank you so much. And we will continue going again to a very different subject. Dr. Amir Teicher is a historian at Tel Aviv University, focusing on the history of modern medicine, modern German history, racism, and eugenics. He's also the academic head of the Wiener Archive for the Study of Nazism and the Holocaust at Tel Aviv University, and the author of the 2020 Cambridge Press book, Social Mendelism, Genetics and the Politics of Race in Germany. Since October 7th, he has written multiply for the Süddeutsche Zeitung about the war and the hostages. And currently, he's here in Berlin as an Alexander von Humboldt Fellow, writing a book about the history of disease carriers. Thank you very much, Amir, for being here with us today.
Who's responsible for
bringing up presentations. Does anyone have this role?
The role has not been filled yet, but
yes, I just have to look
we'll
it
try
up.
to.
Okay.
Actually, I have no idea.
Let's see if it's there.
Do we have any computer expert that could bring the presentation to life?
The question is if it's here at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. I can do without it.
Yeah, no, it's not. Okay, you'll start and we'll...
Hi, everyone. So I decided to speak about something which is not my field of expertise. I thought that would be the proper thing to do. A couple of years ago, I attended a large conference at the Natural History Museum in Tel Aviv. And there were lots of sessions and, I don't know, 200, 300 people. And then there was lunch break. And we all went to the big hall where lunch was served on like these big tables with finger food and so on. And the tables were adjacent to the wall. It took maybe 20 seconds for two of the participants to grab the tables at both ends, move them, to be like 2 meters away from the wall so that everybody can charge on them simultaneously, which everyone did. And 5 minutes later, everybody were already sitting and eating, which was fine. And this is a very non-remarkable event, but it was remarkable for me because I just came back from a year-long stay in Germany, and I couldn't stop thinking, that it would never have happened in a German conference because the tables would remain where they are, and it would take half an hour for people to actually get their food because I think lining up is the mathematically proven worst way of distributing food. Like you have to pay for all the thoughts of everybody ahead of you. And this was a very clear or illustrative example for one of these situations in which the Israeli disregard of order, rules is clearly beneficial over the German adherence to Ordnung, right? And this is something that came up here today, and I think I want to say some words about that. Now, talking about national tendencies is a tricky business. It can easily deteriorate into this kind of shallow stereotyping and, unproductive intellectually and morally alike. But nonetheless, we all acknowledge the fact that there is a clear cultural difference between Germany and Israel when it comes to the place of order, or the Ordnung in German society and culture versus the Yalla Balagan or the improvisation in Israeli society and culture. Where do these differences come from? So studies on the origins of German adherence to Ordnung, to order, to rules, to bureaucracy, have all kinds of answers. Some go back to Martin Luther and to his doctrine and teaching. I won't delve into that right now. Some talk about the Prussian state and its army and the bureaucracy and its importance for building up the German nation. And some talk about the catastrophes of the 20th century in Germany, and therefore the crave for order and bureaucracy and rules that would stop all these all of us from diving into these horrors. Okay, sounds quite convincing. What about the Israeli side? Where does the Israeli disregard of rules and orders or laws come from? So here, I think one could bring up at least 3 different and complementary historical roots. The first one is maybe the Jewish one. Jews for ages and ages had to live as outcasts in a society where the rules were defined often against them. And a population or subpopulation that needs to, and rules usually serve the ruling orders, the ruling classes, and Jews had to cope with discriminatory laws for ages, and therefore had to find a way of a little maneuvering, and going around these laws. So a certain amount of, chutzpah and of trying to find another way to do things could have easily turned into a positive quality, which enables opening otherwise blocked paths. The second element has to do with Zionism. Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire and then by the British. And when the Jews had decided that they want to establish a state in Israel, they found all kinds of ways of how to smuggle into Palestine, even if it was illegal, and how to build all these, in the middle of the night, build these like settlements, the Choma Migdal, that we all, Israelis learn about it at school, and it is highly praised of how we managed to go under the nose of the Brits and so on. So there is this kind of cultural adoration of the fact that the rules were against us, but who cares? We had to do the right thing, and that is sometimes cutting under the rules. And then there is a third element which I think many Israelis encounter, and that is that another reason why many Israelis dislike rules, and that is because rules are connected to Germanness, and Germanness in the sense that it is connected to Nazism and the Holocaust. Okay, so here you can have like these images of the quadratic rows and columns of marching stormtroopers, this kind of image of Nazism, and many Israelis associate rules and order with this kind, with this part of history. And therefore, if this is what order means, then order means, catastrophe, annihilation, Holocaust. We don't want to be a part of that. So far, so good. It all sounds very logical and quite convincing. At least in my profession, which is history, the minute we have a convincing narrative, we need to trash it, as you saw also in the previous lecture. So let's start now trashing it down. Because there are some cracks in this explanation, so let's now go over them again. The Jewish element. So to begin with, it is not by necessity that a group which is outcast tries to go around the laws. Sometimes it tries to prove itself equal by adhering to the laws very strictly, right? And just showing that, no, we can be part of society, we just go by the rules, even more than the local ones. And secondly, if we talk about Jews and laws, I don't think there is any religion which is so legalistic in nature as Judaism. Jews have a long list of rules, like observant Jews, of laws that they have to follow. Every part of their daily life is organized around these laws, around halakha and so on. And this is a very important part of Jewish religious life. Much more than Christianity, for example. So to say that, the Jewish element made Jews not people who would not like laws, you have to doubt that in a sense. Zionism, many, if not most of the Zionist leaders all the time worked to make sure that what they do is legally approved. Next to Choma and Migdal, we have the Balfour Declaration and the UN resolution, and all these are also part of the important things that Jewish Israelis learn about at school, the need to be accepted and the need to be within the laws. And even the story of these settlements built overnight, the Choma and Migdal, which is basically a term and a fence which makes this nightly constructed settlement legal. We want it legal. So also with Zionism, I'm not sure. Moreover, nationalism in general, everywhere that it started, throughout history, started as revolutionary. Only after a nation was built, it became conservative in a sense. But also, the first proponents of German nationalism, people like, Turnvater Jan and other images of the early 19th century, they were imprisoned and chased after because nationalism was a problem for the rulers at the time. So there's nothing, especially Zionist about trying to cut under the existing order when there is no state yet. And thirdly, this story about Nazism and order. Well, yes, the stormtroopers marched in very strict rows and columns, but this is not the way that the German military fought. It couldn't have conquered almost all of Europe by fighting in this way. It had to know how to improvise, and moreover, the Holocaust and the annihilation was never based on laws. It was based on murderous ideology. We said we need to establish, that's the goal we want, and we would do anything needed which is outside the laws in order to get it. So this image is actually wrong, historically unfounded. Moreover, there is another thing that many, I think, Israeli Jews put together, and every German would tell them that it is wrong, and that is this, that they equate order in the German sense with efficiency when it comes to the Holocaust. Because they were orderly, they were efficient, which is obviously wrong. And again, ask your German friends. Ordnung does not mean efficient. Ordnung means all kinds of things. It means maybe that you can protect against all kinds of biases, that you can create impersonality sometimes, that you can guarantee some sort of fairness, but it's a slow process, you know. Ordnung is something that slows things down. It certainly, and this came up a lot in the discussion, it certainly is not the quickest and most efficient way to do things. It guarantees other things. So the bottom line is that these ideas that Israelis have about German Ordnung and about the roots of their own dislike of order, most of them are actually myths. And still, it seems that many of us, Israelis and German alike, are trapped within these norms of how things are done. Some of them we like, so it's not sure we trap, maybe we like, you know, we hug them. But sometimes some Israelis think, and it was said here, we would like to have a little more Ordnung in the way things are done. And I suspect that some Germans also sometimes say, I wish we could cut a corner here or, you know, improvise a little more. But still they stick to the way they do things often. At least in the classroom of my children, I see how when they have to choose the Elternvertreter, it's like a 15-minute process of choosing the only two persons who are anyhow available, but they have to go through the protocol because, I don't know, it protects against something. So given that it is really difficult to change norms because they are ingrained in institutions and in habits and in behaviors, what both sides need is maybe another partner to get inspiration from and learn from and not, you know, be afraid from, but to be inspired by. And that is perhaps why such a meeting is so important. So keep in mind, please, that Ordnung muss sein, but nevertheless, maybe with a little alcohol, yalla balagan. Thank you.
Amir, you were so much in time, and we still have some minutes left for you. So if there's any questions,
yes. Questions? You can see what is in the PowerPoint. Yes.
I really also like your talk.
Thank you.
So I come from a background where I think we think of Israelis in the form of the Jews, that you guys follow the law.
Follow the law.
Yeah, follow the law. And so from your talk today, you've given me another perspective of things. However, you've deconstructed the three kind of like school of thoughts. So based on your own research, why do the Israelites not follow the laws? Because you've given us three perspectives, and then you have deconstructed the three perspectives. So according to you, why?
Okay, so as I start, the first thing I said is this is not my field of expertise, and I think really, I mean, I'm a historian of medicine, and I am also a historian of like German history and Nazism and so on. So there maybe, but about Israeli society, I'm certainly not an expert. I'm just an Israeli. I think there are some studies, sociological studies, you know, about both sides. But I looked at some of them. I don't know. There are various answers to these questions. I would be actually very interested if, and I don't think this was done sufficiently, to do a really good research with Germans and ask them what does, you know, order mean for you. I think some of the answers would be very deep, almost metaphysical ones, and I think I want to get to them. But some of the answers are out there, you know, and maybe during the discussion people would say that. But about Israelis, I think, yeah, it's a mixture. I think there is some truth in some of the things I said. I just always suspect, when it looks convincing, I'm saying, I'm not sure, maybe it's just a myth, you know, that we want to endorse. But why? It's a mixture of, as I said, things are built into institutions and into habits and into education and into what your father tells you is a good thing to do and what your father tells, or mother, you know, no, don't do that, and then you recreate that. And so there's a mixture of things, but I'll stop there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. I saw some other hands before. Questions for Amir. I think and hope Amir is available later in the networking part for a few more questions. While Eva is already preparing her presentation.
I'm wondering if I can actually take this up because it sits really... Is there somebody responsible for this one, and can I remove it because it sits so strongly that I'm a bit afraid I'm breaking something if I take it out?
Whose computer is this?
Whose computer is this? That's a good question.
Okay. So I will, in the meanwhile, introduce Professor Eva Unger again.
I didn't hear. Thank you.
Eva Unger is a leading researcher in the field of hybrid photovoltaics, currently specializing in the development of, and this I need to read, scalable solution-based processes for perovskite photovoltaic devices. We leave it to you, Eva, to explain to us what your research is about. And Eva did her undergraduate education in chemistry at the University of Marburg. A PhD in physical chemistry followed at Uppsala University in Sweden, a postdoc in Stanford from 2012 to 2014. And she started her independent research group in a dual appointment between Lund universities in Sweden, where she held a tenure-track position, and Helmholtz Center Berlin, where she led a young investigators group founded back then by the BMBF. Since 2022, Professor Unger is at Humboldt University, funded by Helmholtz, in a program supporting excellent female scientists. And in 2023, she received the Helmholtz High Impact Award. And last but not least, this year, in 2025, she was among the so-called 100 heads of Berlin science, awarded by the Tagesspiegel, a newspaper here in Berlin. And Eva, now we're all ears to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I chose for today a topic that I think is of very general importance, and I tried to come up with a catchy title, so I called it Empowered by Uniting Research Data. So very much in this spirit. My first, let's say, confrontation with the fair data principles was when I entered the Greco-EU project in 2018. And during one of the first workshops, there was this basically declaration of Open Research Europe requires open data or open access to research data supporting articles under principles as open as possible, as close as necessary, and data should be deposited in data repositories. And then during this workshop, we started asking questions, so which data repositories and where would we actually start finding information? And we had a lot of discussion that actually led me to understand that, of course, funders, also very validly should impose these principles on us, that then we as researchers need to become involved in creating the type of research data, databases and infrastructures that we as researchers find useful, so that it doesn't lead to access, again, bureaucratic, effort at the end of a research project to dump all of your data somewhere into a very, let's say, non-structured data repository. Of course, we follow the rules, but this is not going to be useful. The data is not going to be findable for other researchers. It's not going to be accessible. It's also not going to be interoperable by default, and also not reusable. So we really started, and in my group, we do research starting out with new materials discovery, developing high throughput methodologies in order to screen for new materials very quickly. We also use a synchrotron for this purpose. We developed an ink chemistry, process optimization. We work a lot in putting metrology tools into processes, but also we make larger area prototypes because we really want to also be able to interface with industry. So we have a very broad spectrum. This is one example where we started to, while we are coating a material, this is a slot die coater, but that's not important for the case. So we make a material, and while we're coating, we change the composition. And that means all of a sudden we can do lots of experiments really quickly. And we can monitor now with many different probes what the material is and how it's evolving. And that also means that's one of the reasons we realized we need good research data infrastructure, because we're generating terabytes of data very, very quickly from many, many different sources. And then also, this is an example of one of our small modules that we're making, but in the world, if you look into all the technology field, you realize halide perovskite solar cells is one of these fields where there is a lot of global activities with lots and thousands of researchers and research labs being involved, where there is just incredible amount of information generated daily, that now we're arriving at the point that there's so much new knowledge being generated that we as individual scientists are not able anymore to read it all. So we certainly move and need to face a paradigm shift of how we are communicating and how we are actually distributing the information that's being collected. So to just color it a bit, this is a layer stack, and I don't think it's important for this specific talk, but this is a generic layer stack of a halide perovskite solar cell. So you see multiple layers. We set up a database, and just looking at already, the number of permutations of how these layers could be interchanged and changed, we had a number of 7 × 10⁻17. So that's all the different options we have, and that's a lot. And sure, then you could say, it's fine if thousands of researchers go through all these, 10⁻17 different options, but nobody can make use of the information if that's being disseminated in scientific articles. So already back in 2018, we started a project where at the time it was only 15,000 papers that had been published, which sounds like a lot, maybe it isn't. But out of those, we started a communal initiative where we asked 80 people to reach 200 papers each. We had a standard protocol asking each one of them, we want you to extract certain information out of the research data that's being made public. And a little bit out of a beautiful coincidence, because I was traveling in Israel, meeting many different people at many different institutions, and I ran into a guy, Asaf, who I had met before in Sweden, and then it turned out he had just founded a company called Material Zone, which is based close to Tel Aviv. So this company came out of the lab of Ari Saban, who's now president of Berlin University, who had set up his whole lab to be a high-throughput new materials discovery lab. And it was wonderful and inspiring for me to see. So it really influenced and shaped also the way I started thinking about how to screen for new materials quickly. And in this lab, they had already started to very systematically organize their research data. And then it became a spin-off. And this spin-off, or this startup Material Zone, helped us to launch the first version of the database we had been accumulating with 46,000 data points. I usually say most of the work was done by my postdoc, Jesper Jakobsen. My biggest contribution was a comment like, wouldn't it be wonderful if you click on a data point, you get to the original paper, so that makes paper finding easier. So that was launched in 2019, and we have continued since. Because I always call that, well, that's the old stuff. That's just literature data. That's what scientists chose to disseminate to each other. That is really just the tip of the iceberg. And the iceberg is a very nice analogon because it also shows you the information we're generating is almost like a big frozen iceberg, where you only see the top, the fraction of information that gets disseminated to our communities. But below this, there is so much information that's being generated and gathered in research laboratories worldwide that we have no efficient way of sharing, because we have limited ourselves to the research cycle of peer-reviewed papers being the one pathway of how we're disseminating information to each other. So we started to build what we call a lab data or research data management platform. And here we've recently strongly partnered with a German national research data infrastructure project called FAIRMAT. Coincidentally, they sit in the same building. 3 of my former students are working there. So we had very close ties. But I also found there is actually really big benefit if you can meet somebody over coffee to discuss the next step on a daily basis. So that was one of the accelerating factors for us. So we're digitalizing all our workflows, and the goal is also to not just collect a fraction of the data, but start to set up research data management in our laboratories so that it can be replicated and so that others can essentially download it, adapt it, code and make modifications themselves in order for all of us to start contributing to the same global data set. Now, one of the really benefiting co-factors is through this project, we are discussing with a lot of scientists worldwide about the things we need to know from each other in order to actually report exactly on what parameters are necessary to be exactly defined so that an experiment can be repeated. So setting up as a community common research data platforms with the goal of making that the actual research data management itself transferable, that actually leads to also a greater opportunity for collaboration. Of course, we're taking into account that as a researcher, you have a high interest in making first use of your research data that you acquired through blood, sweat, and tears and a lot of hours in the laboratory. And with this, the software is called NOMAD, which with a database already established for theoretical data, we also have the opportunity to set up a local server. So you can basically mirror an open data infrastructure on a local server, and that means once you've collected everything, you still make the decision of what to make public. But when you decide to publish, you can do so in a mouse click, and that was always the goal. So with that said, we're also, through European projects and other initiatives, we're working now strongly in understanding the hurdles of exporting what we're doing to other research laboratories. We had a very strong partnership with NREL in the United States, which was, I now say was, it's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the United States. Yesterday we had a meeting where they tell us, essentially, they're going to start rebranding. Because renewable energy is now basically a no-go under the common political climate in the United States. And it's just one of these examples where you feel, well, because of that, we have to push even more and even stronger and actually involve as many stakeholders in the world that are willing to still, or still understand there's still a reason why through research, development, and technology, we're actually working on solutions that make coexistence more sustainable and also long-term more possible for a global population. And with this last word, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Sorry that I'm asking all the questions. No, so I really enjoy the concept of Nomad. I work there as well. And there's something you said which I really also enjoy, and I was thinking that it could also be kind of like translated differently in terms of what we really need to be able to make a synthesis reproducible. And from my own personal experience from text mining data, I tend to realize that, sorry guys, scientific papers are most often written not to be reproducible.
Yes.
So I feel like since you're already a proponent of this, I don't know if you could also try to advocate in terms of the fact that people writing scientific papers should honestly, consciously think about the fact that their research needs to be reproducible. I'm a theorist. I went to the lab to kind of like reproduce a certain synthesis, and for 3 months I couldn't.
Yeah. Direct comment to this. So when we started the first data collection campaign, for me, one of the most valuable things was that all of my PhD students had to read 200 papers, and they all realized how badly they were written. And I felt like, great guys, you do better, because now you understand how important it is to be exact. Now, one of the, let's say, side goals of this is people should not have to write experimental sections. So if you start building up the metadata schema so that an experimental workflow can be exactly defined, you should be generating a standardized experimental description that's human readable in a mouse click. Yeah? And that's also the part where I think we are looking to partner with the journals, that we say essentially, we need also to help the publishers to impose certain incitaments in order to make sure everybody is to some level being forced to describe exactly how an experiment was done based on a standard established by the research community, meaning by others that would have to be able to reproduce the data. Yes, and it's absolutely crucial. So we should not leave experimental section to be down to the creativity of scientists. I feel it should be as boring and technical as possible, but all the details need to be in there. So thanks for the comment.
But what about even digitalizing the data collection process and the measurements? Because most of the problems even comes from measurements.
Yes, that's exactly also what we're doing. So we're trying as much as possible, to, it sounds terrible, but remove flexibility in human input. To basically standardize and also automate the information collection. Yes.
Thank you very much, Eva. We're having now our last lecture for tonight, and this is Dr. Lior Shaltiel. We saw Lior already before, but I would briefly like to introduce him again. Dr. Lior Shaltiel is an awarded executive and scientist. In 2015, he founded and currently leads as academic head the biomedic MBA program at Hebrew University Business School. And since 2021, he serves as a CEO and director at the Canadian Israeli biopharmaceutical company Neurexon Biologic, which works at the forefront of utilizing advanced exosome technologies for the treatment of spinal cord injuries, and this I have to read again, and traumatic nerve injury indications through minimally invasive administration. Recently, he assumed his role as co-chairperson at the MedTech division at the Israeli Association of Engineers. Lior, thank you very much, and we're excited to hear from you.
It's just 10 minutes I have, and I have a lot of slides to share. So first of all, stop me when need. I'm the last one before you and the food, reception and things like that, and probably drinks. So I will start with introducing myself. I'm first of all, then the connection to Germany. As I said, I was a DAAD scholarship back in 2006. I also received the Bavarian Stiftung for 3 years, part of my PhD. I graduated from the LMU, and for me, Germany, after 8 years here, is my zweite Heimat. So it's very important for me, the connection with Germany. And I try to keep it, although I moved to Israel back. And so I hope you can see it. Okay, good. So what are the most important part of mine is, first of all, to combine scientists and entrepreneurship and get it to more applied science. And my topic is biotech, more specifically pharmaceutical. I always wanted to design new drug and find a cure for a very, very challenging disabilities and disease. And I talked about it that Israel, when we are leading the high tech, we should lead the biotech. We have, and you know it as part of the sponsors of the elite scientists here, we have amazing scientists that have a huge contribution for our society. And to do it, we need to tech transfer this technology from the academic environment to reproducibility and also to companies. So with that, as a scientist, when I study chemistry from pharmacy and biology, what is needed is to understand the combination of science and economy and business. No scientist is getting pure MBA and knowledge, and then they are getting into the industry without knowing they are one of the best scientists, but they don't know the context, how to research and how to develop in the industry. And this is exactly what we do at the Hebrew University. We celebrate 10 years since this program was established. It's a completely new program from the Hebrew University. It never happened before. And this is a comparison like a finance, like a fintech. We have also the Biomed MBA. This is the first university program. I'm sorry that it's in Hebrew, but so I will just say it in short. The the first university program in Israel, and we built it based on experience from Berkeley, Johns Hopkins. And now, 10 years, we have more than 200 alumni. The idea behind that is to combine the lecturers from the industry, so establish completely new courses at the Hebrew Business School and educate the new leaders of the field in pharmacology, like biotech, medtech, digital health, etc. With that, I will move on to my day-to-day business, is being a CEO of Nuroxon, and I will share with you some information. And we have also the international program that was established 3 years ago. So we are actually calling to international students to finish our degree in 1 year, 2 semesters. Now let's move to Nuroxon and share with you some data. So as the title said, where nature ends, Nuroxon begins. We take what we have in our body, which are the exosomes. Those are tiny vesicles that secreted from stem cells in our body and push it in order to get regeneration of neurons. We are a publicly traded company. This is why we have a disclaimer here. So take this in consideration. And don't buy or sell. Let's go to the essence. I mean, taking the quote from Christopher Reeve, that all scientists agree that the best way to restore function after spinal cord injury is to find ways to regenerate the broken nerves, okay, and reconnect them. And this is exactly what we do at Nuroxon. Our mission is to develop regenerative medicine to target nerves and tissue recovery of spinal cord injury and other CNS traumatic injuries, like a traumatic brain injury, facial nerves, and even optic nerve, which is part of the CNS. Our first product is ExoP10, which is a combination between the exosomes and a siRNA, specifically siRNA, in order to push the system into more regenerative aspects. The company was established in 2020. We made a successful reverse takeover to become a publicly traded company in Canada. We have a strong patent portfolio of 5 patents, 2 of them already granted in the US and Israel. We are pushing our way into the clinic using our orphan drug designation in the FDA, this is the United States and Europe. And we also secure our master cell bank in order to produce it in the highest standard, which is a master cell bank, which is GMP and fully characterized, approved by the FDA. As a company, preclinical company, it's quite remarkable that we will be able in the last 4 years to raise $18,000 million, and we have around 80 million shares, which I will say I get a weekly report. The majority of the investors are actually Germans, and this is unheard of before. We are Canadians, first of all, but the majority are actually traded here in Germany. So the company was established in Israel, and now we have a mother company in Canada that holds 2 companies, the Israeli and the US, which is hold the master cell bank in order to produce naive exosomes for longevity, cosmetic, and aesthetic needs. This is our portfolio of patents. I will move on to 2 main indication, which is the acute spinal cord injury and the glaucoma. Again, the optic nerve is the same mechanism of action, and we're trying to have use our ExoP10 in order to get efficacy with these 2 indications. What are exosomes? Tiny vesicles, homing specifically to inflammation. So it's like a guided missiles, and we are loading them with our siRNA. Why they are so potent? Because it's a cell therapy without cells. It's an off-shelf product. I can treat with one batch several people. It's an allogeneic approach and not autologic. It's not personal medicines that I need to get from the patient material. I can use one material for 7 patients. It's a cell-free, so all the challenges of dealing with cells are not there. I can administer it in minimal and invasive way. Our first proof of concept was done intranasally, through the nose, to get to the spinal cord injury, so there is no operation needed. And the most important, when we deal with CNS, and central nervous system, it's caused the BBB, the blood-brain barrier. This is our portfolio. XOP10 has already 3 indications, and we have other 2 products on the early stage of the development. That's the product. I will not go to more details. We can produce higher amount of exosomes due to our 3D bioreactor. And this is, I think, the most convincing video. I hope I can share it. On the right side is the rat after full transection of spinal cord, cut the spinal cord, which is actually walk again. And this was done in intranasal administration. On the left, you can see a rat that is completely paralyzed without the treatment. And what we see on the functional recovery, we can see on the tissue level. On the right upper side, you can see really the gap close. This is an MRI of the spinal cord injury, and the neurons are filled in this gap, and this is the reason that we see a functional recovery. We had other results, also in biodistribution, etc., but our intent is to get into human next year as a first in human, as a compassionate use, and also have a submission of IND to have a clinical trial, hopefully also in Germany, in US, by the 2027. This is a comparison between what we bring to the table and other competitors. And we tick all the boxes because we are minimal invasive. There is no medical device involved. There is no operation, and it's off-the-shelf use. We took the same product and apply it to glaucoma, to optic nerve damage. And also here, we really can see restoration of the retina ganglion cell, meaning we have more cells that can get the light in. This is I will jump. And also translate it to a positive ERG recording, meaning a rat that got this treatment could see again after 18 days. We have also results in facial nerves, facialis, and the idea is to, commercial-wise, is to have 3 layers. First of all, our pharmaceutical approach, which is the XOP10. We have the naive exosomes as a longevity aesthetic pillar. And the third one is the combination and create a licensing by our technology of loading exosomes with different targets of siRNA. I will move on. The idea is to get it to human as soon as possible by the end of 2026, beginning of 2027. Our board is a mixture between neurosurgeries, ophthalmologists like Professor Michael Belkin that has a huge exit with Alcon last year, and also rehabilitation professor like Professor Gabriel Zelig. And I'm very proud that our inventor, Professor Shulamit Levenberg from the Technion, which is also very known here in Germany, she actually started all this project together with Professor Danny Offel from the Tel Aviv University. So I hope I've convinced you. This is the last slide for today. We have a platform, we have a product, we have a subsidiary in the US, and we are now seeking to the next step in order to get this Canadian company into the US market and uplisting ourselves to NASDAQ. That's the last slide, and this is actually the stock from the Toronto Stock Exchange venture in Jerusalem. So thank you very much. Okay, wow. Wow.
Is there any question, a 1-minute question for you all?
So from the public information, we are aiming to have uplisting by the beginning of 2026. It's a good point. Probably you ask about because of P10 as a tumor suppressor. We don't see it, and the main issue is first of all the fact that the exosomes are localized into the inflammation, and we are dealing also with the acute phase of the injury. We are not getting into a chronic spinal cord injury when you need to treat for a longer time. Our treatment is in the therapeutic windows of 2 weeks. It is what's considered to be the acute phase. And in that case, we are injecting 2 to 4 injections, and we don't see an effect.
Thank you, Lior. Thank you so much. So as you understand already, I'm in charge on the food here. So we have wine and beer just over here, and the food is at the other room over there. So please grab something and come back over here, because we have posters and we have some gift for you on the way out. But let's spend some time here, you know, mingle and talking. And please, the scientists with the posters, bring your posters over here that people can look on that. All right, thank you so much.